Chapter 197. The residence that Lin Shuanghe found for He Yan had been missing for several days. Ever since he returned to Shuajing, Lin Shuanghe acted as if he didn't exist. He Yan also didn't want to rashly go to his door to find him. It wasn't good to ask someone to do something and rush him. After a while, He Yan began to suspect that this person was doing it on purpose. As usual, Xiaoju left early in the morning and returned late at night. He didn't know what she was busy with. He Yan would appear during the day. Ever since she went to the Su residence to see Fu Wang, she didn't go to the Su residence again. She had to give Fu Wang the cold shoulder. When Fu Wang saw that He Yan didn't appear for a long time, he would definitely give up on the idea of pushing and pulling her. He was afraid that he would let go of this money tree. In order to prove his worth, he would only put in more effort to find useful information from the Su residence. He Yan wasn't in a hurry. In the past few days, other than secretly seeing He Yinxing again, she also spent a few days at the entrance of the He residence. She didn't know if it was because of He Rufei, but the number of guards outside the He residence had more than doubled. He Yan didn't want to expose himself, so he could only hide in the dark and observe. He Rufei didn't do anything other than go to court every day. He and his colleagues mostly socialized at restaurants and didn't bring anyone home. In addition, he also went to the Su residence once with the so-called tonic for visiting his cousin. But was it really to visit He Xining? He Yan didn't think so. But in the eyes of outsiders, He Rufei's actions clearly showed that he had a close relationship with his younger sister. There were even rumors that because of the accident that happened to Su Yunqing's grandmother, He Rufei took care of his younger sister even more carefully. In the end, it actually gave He Rufei a good reputation. He Yan only felt that it was a bit funny. He also felt that the He family's methods of acting were really endless. Autumn had arrived and the heat of summer had completely faded. On this day, He Yan had just returned from outside the residence, and was surprised to find that the courtyard was much more lively. She had left early in the morning and did not know what had happened. However, Baigua happily ran over and whispered, "Young mistress is entertaining guests in the courtyard. Young master, you should wash up a little and go take a look." She leaned closer and said mysteriously, "There are many young ladies here today. Second young master is here too." She was young, so when she said these words, she was not shy or coy, but full of the innocence of a child. However, when He Yan heard these words, they were not very pleasant to hear. Bai Rongwei had told her before that she would hold a banquet before the Mid-Autumn Festival. On the surface, it was to invite the ladies, but in fact, it was to matchmake Xiaoju. He Yan didn't expect her to come back so quickly. Usually, Xiaoju would come back late. Sometimes, she would be asleep by the time Xiaoju came back. But today, there was a girl around and she came back so early. Ha, what a coincidence. Baigua saw that He Yan was silent and said, "Young master?" He Yan came back to his senses and forced a smile. "I won't go. I've been running around the whole day and I'm really tired. I want to go back to my room and rest." Baigua. But she felt that He Yan was in a bad mood and felt that it was strange. This young master, he was gentle and did not put on airs. He would take the initiative to clean the dishes and chopsticks. Sometimes, when he saw that she was hungry, he would deliberately leave some snacks in the dishes for her. Baigua felt that among all the masters she had met, other than the young master and his wife, this young master, he was the best. However, today, his unhappiness was clearly written on his face. After all, they had been master and servant for a while. Baigua thought, could it be that he had been wronged outside? Before she could figure it out, He Yan walked quickly down the corridor with his head lowered. He Yan thought that what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. However, this corridor was connected to the pavilion of the main courtyard. Bai Rongwei saw him at a glance and called out, "Young master he." If he pretended that he didn't hear her, it would be too deliberate. He Yan could only brace himself and turn around. He looked at Bai Rongwei and smiled. "Young mistress Xiao." Bai Rongwei stood up and walked towards him. "I was just asking Huijin when you would come back. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to make it in time for today's autumn banquet. You came at the right time. We haven't started yet." The host was so kind. It would be impolite to leave at this time. He Yan could only walk over and salute her. "Young mistress is so considerate." Xiao family's house was specially renovated according to his wife's preferences when old General Xiao was still alive. Xiao Ju's grandmother was from Suzhou. Therefore, the Xiao family's courtyard was especially elegant and unique in Shuo capital. Bai Rongwei didn't invite many guests to the banquet. There were only 4 or 5 people in total. It wasn't clear whether they were her good friends or not. However, the 4 young women sitting there were each beautiful in their own way. Xiao Ju sat beside Xiao Jing. The 2 brothers were famous for being handsome men in Dewei. For a moment, the courtyard was like a fairyland. Dewei had a strict rule against men and women. Men and women were not allowed to sit together at the age of 7. This rule was abolished not long after Emperor Wen Xuan ascended the throne. Emperor Wen Xuan yearned for the elegant and unrestrained manner of the famous scholars of the past. He didn't think that it was because of the old rules. Therefore, Dewei wasn't as strict towards unmarried men and women as the previous dynasty. Bai Rongwei smiled and explained to the others at the banquet. This is young master He. He is a good friend of Huaijin. At such a young age, he has already been bestowed the title of Muan Lang by His Majesty. She ordered the servants to add a bowl and chopsticks for He Yan. However, for some reason, the bowl was placed next to Xiao Jing. Bai Rongwei sat next to a round-faced madam and said to He Yan, "Today we have invited a few friends to our residence to try the newly made chrysanthemum crisps. Everyone, please treat this as a normal family banquet. There is no need to be polite. Just be at ease." Although she said that, other than Xiao Jing and his wife, the older madams, and the indifferent Xiao Ju, the rest of the guests couldn't be considered casual. He Yan sat next to Xiao Ju and looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju sat on the other side of Xiao Jing. He rarely touched his chopsticks. Most of the time, he just sat there. Although he hid it well, if one looked closely, they could see that he was impatient. The other maidens were different. They sat at the long table directly opposite Xiao Ju. The more timid ones glanced at Xiao Ju out of the corner of their eyes. The lingering affection in their eyes couldn't be ignored. The bolder ones stared directly at Xiao Ju. Their beautiful eyes were filled with adoration. It was enough to make one's bones melt. Ian thought to himself. Bai Rongwei knew that Xiao Ju didn't like people like Shen Muxue. The 4 maidens that she found were completely different from Shen Muxue's cold and aloof temperament. However, their appearance was comparable to Shen Muxue's. Sitting there, she wanted to flip the table and leave. If Shen Muxue was here, he would definitely be angered to death. However, although she thought this in her heart, she couldn't show it on her face. He Yan lowered his head and ate. At this time he didn't talk while eating. He just treated it as a normal meal. The only difference was that there were 4 beautiful maidens sitting across from him. This meal was extremely awkward. He Yan wasn't the only one who felt awkward. At the end of the meal, even Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei couldn't handle it. After all, although Xiao Ju's personality wasn't as gentle as Xiao Jing's, her face was still very attractive. Moreover, Xiao Jing was already married. The 4 maidens all looked at Xiao Ju. They were all noble maidens who were carefully raised in Shuojing. They were very polite. However, the 4 of them still found some topics to talk about with Xiao Ju. For example, does second young master Xiao like autumn? What do you do on a daily basis? Will you be staying in Shuojing after this? And other meaningless questions. Xiao Ju answered them. However, if she could answer them in one word, she wouldn't say more than 2. Most of the time, it was Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing who came out to fill in the gaps. He Yan was quite happy in his heart. However, when he thought about it, he felt that he was being silly. How could he be happy about such things? Was he possessed? Night was coming. After the meal, the madam said goodbye to Xiao Jing and her husband. He Yan and Xiao Ju stood to the side. The 4 maidens' reluctant gazes almost saw through Xiao Ju. One of the bolder maidens looked at Xiao Ju and asked with a smile. When second young master Xiao was at the hunting ground, no one could compare to his charm. After this, when are you free? Would you be willing to practice archery with me? Xiao Ju looked at her expressionlessly for a while. Then the corner of her mouth twitched. I have a habit when I practice. The maiden looked forward to it. Life and death. Cough, cough, cough. Xiao Jing interrupted in time. She laughed and said, Huaijin is joking. He likes to joke. However, as soon as she said this, the maiden's mother's expression changed. She quickly pulled her daughter away. Bai Rongwei was angry and amused at the same time. After they left, she said to Xiaoju, "You child, why are you still the same as before? If you don't like her, then don't like her. Why do you have to deliberately scare her? Miss Tian has also practiced martial arts. She is also cheerful and generous. I think she is very good." When Xiaoju didn't say anything, Bai Rongwei continued, "What about Miss Li? The one who sat opposite you just now? She looks weak and delicate. She has good handwriting and can speak eloquently. She is very gentle and quiet." Xiaoju still didn't say anything. Bai Rongwei looked up and saw He. She asked He, "Young master He, you have also met the 4 maidens today. Don't you think it is a good idea?" He was speechless. What did this have to do with her? Disaster really fell from the sky. However, in front of these people, He could only ask himself. He slowly opened his mouth. The 4 maidens are very good. Their temperaments and appearances are first class. Whoever marries them will be blessed by his past life. Bai Rongwei probably felt that she had gained the approval of Xiaoju's good friend. She said, "Huaijin, look, even young master he thinks they are good." Xiaoju suddenly said in a calm voice, "Sister-in-law, if you think they are good, why don't you invite them back and give them to Big Brother? With Big Brother's temperament and appearance, they shouldn't feel wronged." These words were so harsh that even the usually gentle Xiaojing couldn't help but warn, "Xiao Huaijin." Xiaoju was unmoved. She glanced at Xiaojing and said calmly, "Big Brother, why don't you think about what you did when Mother wanted to choose a wife for you? Don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Big Brother should know better than I do." After she finished speaking, she didn't care about Xiaojing and Bai Rongwei's reactions and left in a huff. He stood there and felt inexplicably awkward. He softly explained to Xiaoju, "Perhaps the commander-in-chief is in a bad mood today. Young mistress, please don't take it to heart." "I'm not taking it to heart." Bai Rongwei was stunned for a moment. She seemed to have recovered from her shock and looked at her husband. However, was Huaijin angry just now? Despite the rumors that the Right Army's commander-in-chief training troops was unreasonable, harsh and cold, almost no one had ever seen Xiaoju lose his temper in the Fu. Most of the time, he was just too lazy to care. It seemed like it had been many years since he had written the words, "I'm angry," on his face. He's done this before. Why is he so angry this time? She didn't understand. Someone was knocking on the door. Again and again, the knocking was very precise and unyielding. Even if the people inside were too lazy to pay attention to it, the people outside were not discouraged. It was as if they were going to knock until the end of time if they did not open the door. In the entire courtyard, the only person who had the guts to do this was the heroine. Xiaoju paused for a moment and said, "Come in." He-Yan's head poked in from behind the door. She also knew that Xiaoju was in a bad mood. She had a fawning smile on her face as she closed the door behind her. She walked forward and asked, "Commander-in-Chief, are you all right?" Xiaoju sat on the chair and replied, "I'm fine." Looking at his expression, he didn't seem to be fine. What he said to Bai Rongwei just now was a little too much. However, He-Yan was quite happy to hear him say that. However, she quickly scolded herself in her heart. How could she be like this? How could she, as an outsider, cheer for a family conflict? How was she different from those despicable people? During her stay here, Bai Rongwei had taken care of her a lot. It was reasonable for her to help mediate and not add fuel to the fire. He-Yan ran in front of him and leaned half of her body on the table. She looked at him and said, "Commander-in-Chief, young Mistress Xiao has good intentions. What you did just now was a little hurtful." Xiaoju's gaze shifted to her face. His eyes were cold. "Lady He, what do you think I should do?" He had called her Lady He many times. Sometimes it was teasing, and sometimes it was mean. However, this time it was cold and even a little angry. He-Yan carefully chose her words. "At least, you should be more tactful." Xiaoju sneered. "Why should I?" He-Yan choked. "If it was Lady He, would you be more tactful?" He suddenly asked. He-Yan was puzzled. "I'm a woman. If your father and brother were to find a few handsome young masters like they did today," he said sarcastically, "wouldn't you reject them directly?" He-Yan thought that if it was in the past, She would have to be polite and courteous in order to save everyone's face. However, now that she had someone she liked, she would not be able to force it. However, she could not say this to Xiaoju. The person in front of her did not care about her avoidance. He stared at her and asked again, "Lady He, what should you do?" He Yan could not go against her conscience when she met his gaze. After a while, she slammed the table. "I thought about it. If it were me, I would have made the same choice as you, Commander-in-Chief. Maybe I would have said even worse things. Commander-in-Chief, you're right. Well said. If you don't like them, just reject them. There's no need to give them the wrong hints. Sometimes, being polite and courteous can be seen as flirting to the other party. Flirting can make others unable to sleep at night. If you don't have such intentions, then you're lying." In the end, there was a hint of complaint in her tone. No one knew who she was referring to. Xiaoju saw her indignant expression and her expression softened. She smiled. "At least you have some awareness." He Yan saw that she was in a better mood. She took out a sachet from her sleeve and gave it to her. "This is for you." Xiaoju took it and looked at it. She looked up and asked, "You made this? How is that possible?" He Yan replied without hesitation. "How could I know how to make this? It was Grandma Xiao who made it. She also made one for me. I forgot to give it to you earlier." She took out her own sachet with cloud patterns. "I heard that there are herbs and amulets in it." She saw that Xiaoju was holding the sachet and didn't say anything. She leaned closer. "I didn't expect Grandma Xiao to prepare one for me. Commander-in-Chief, Grandma Xiao is gentle and kind. She's wholeheartedly thinking about you. Although the method is not to your liking, you should talk to her about this kind of thing. There's no need to hurt the harmony between the two of you. There's no need to be so calculative between family members." She kept talking and moving her head closer and closer. Xiaoju couldn't help but laugh. He bent his fingers and pushed her head back. "Stop, I'm not angry." At first he was angry, but it wasn't because of Bai Rongwei. This person still didn't know anything. He felt a little helpless. Being angry at someone who didn't know anything was destined to not be able to vent his anger. "Really?" He Yan looked at him. "Really?" He lowered his eyes and thought of something. After a while he said, "I'll be out of the city for a few days. Is it okay for you to stay here alone?" He Yan was startled. "Do you need my help?" Xiaoju had been leaving early and returning late these days. He Yan could sense that he had something important to do. It must have something to do with Su Jingfu and Xiao Zhongwu. Although she was busy with the He family and the Su family, if Xiaoju needed her help, He Yan wouldn't refuse. "No need. I can do it myself." He Yan nodded. "When will you be back?" "I'm not sure." Xiaoju looked at the burning wick. "I'll try to be back before mid-autumn." Prime Minister Su's residence in the capital was brightly lit at this moment. Prime Minister Su was a scholar. When he held a banquet at home, he didn't like women to dance. At most he would find 2 guqin players to play the guqin. Chu Zhao knelt in front of the small table and looked at the teacup in front of him. The steam rising from the teacup was like a layer of gauze that covered his expression, making his face look unreal. Su Jingfu didn't like to drink. He only liked to drink tea. The people who came to the Su family to give gifts also knew how to cater to his preferences. Even the tea leaves that were given to the servants could be sold at a good price. The servants stood on both sides respectfully. Su Jingfu didn't have a son. Everyone in the Su family knew that Su Jingfu treated this favorite pupil of his as his own son. Su Jingfu's only daughter, Su Pingting, had a deep affection for Chu Xilan. Sooner or later, the teacher and the student would become husband and son-in-law. "You went to Jiang very smoothly this time," Su Jingfu said with a smile. When he was young, he was handsome and refined, but when he grew older, he became kind and amiable. Just by looking at his appearance, one would think that he was an old man who was easy to get along with. He took a sip of tea and said, "However, when you were in the Rundu, why did you stay for a few more days?" Chu Zhao replied gently, "The people in the Rundu were hungry. Xilan couldn't bear to leave alone. I wanted to stay in the Rundu to help and see if I could ask for reinforcements. I didn't expect that General Yen would lead troops to help and solve the Rundu's urgent situation." It was obvious that he wasn't lying. Su Jingfu was still smiling kindly. He didn't say that he was right, but he didn't say that he was wrong either. The atmosphere was a little tense. Just as they were in a deadlock, a girl's voice suddenly sounded. "Father, why didn't you call me when Brother Xylan came?" The next moment, a girl in a yellow dress flew in like a flower and sat next to Chu Xylan. This girl was very beautiful. She was as delicate as a porcelain doll. There was an air of arrogance between her eyebrows. She looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. Her clothes and jewelry were luxurious and expensive. There was a ruby hairpin in her hair bun. The ruby was delicate and beautiful, making her look like a rose. This was Su Jingfu's only daughter, Su Pingting. Su Jingfu only had this pearl in his palm when he was old. He almost spoiled her to the heavens. Even the current princess was not as fastidious as Su Pingting. When Su Pingting arrived at the banquet hall, the atmosphere immediately eased. Su Jingfu shook his head and laughed. "You came here to criticize me. You don't even care about me. Everyone says that girls are biased towards outsiders." Really? When Su Pingting heard that, she didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, she raised her eyebrows and said coquettishly, "I see Father every day, but I haven't seen Brother Xylan in a long time. Father, can you not let Brother Xylan go too far away from the capital next time?" She naturally held Chu Zhao's arm and looked at him. "Brother Xylan, when I heard that you went to Jiang, I was scared to death. How could Father do that? Fortunately, you're fine. When you weren't around, I prayed for your safe return in front of the Bodhisattva every day. It seems that the Bodhisattva heard my prayers and protected you." Su Jingfu said sourly. "I didn't see you praying for me." "Father." Okay, little ancestor. I won't say any more, okay?" Su Jingfu begged and looked at Chu Zhao. "However, Xylan, you came at the right time. I have something to say." Chu Xylan looked at Su Jingfu. "Teacher, please speak. I heard that today, Xiao Ruby's wife invited a few young ladies from her colleagues' manors to the Xiao mansion as guests. She said that they were guests, but it was obviously to choose a wife for Xiao Huijin. You're about the same age as Xiao Huijin. Since I'm your teacher, I should worry about these things for you." Su Pingting was stunned. Her face immediately turned red. "Father, now you know how to be shy?" Su Jingfu smiled and teased. Then he said, "Xylan, you're my most outstanding student. You grew up with Pingting and are Qing Mei's childhood sweetheart. When you were young, I planned to marry Pingting to you when you grew up. Looking at it now, that time has come. What do you think?" The servants in the hall all buried their heads to hide their surprise. Although they knew that this day would come, they couldn't help but feel surprised when they actually heard it. After all, with Chu Zhao's status, marrying Prime Minister Su's daughter was really climbing up the social ladder. Chu Zhao stood up, lifted the corner of his robe, and knelt down in front of Su Jingfu. He bowed to Su Jingfu. "This student thanks teacher for your kindness. To be able to marry Pingting is this student's good fortune from 3 lifetimes. Marriage is completely up to teacher." Chapter 198. It was late at night. The lights in the courtyard had already been extinguished. Only the lantern at the door was lit, like a firefly perched on a leaf, about to fly away in the next moment. Ying Xiang walked forward with the lantern and greeted, "Fourth young master." Chu Zhao raised his head and glanced at her. "Didn't I tell you not to wait for me?" "This servant couldn't sleep," Ying Xiang said softly. "I came out with the lantern to take a look and coincidentally bumped into you." Chu Zhao did not speak and entered the room. "You can leave." Ying Xiang bowed and left the room, closing the door behind her. Chu Zhao sat in front of the table and pressed his forehead. Just now at the Su residence, Su Jingfu's words floated in his ears. "Xylana, I only have one daughter. In the future, you can't bully Pingting. If Pingting comes home and complains to me, even if I'm your teacher, I won't let you off." Su Pingting pouted. "Why would Brother Xylan bully me? But Brother Xylan is so handsome. There are many girls in Shuo capital who like him. After I become Brother Xylan's wife, if there are any blind vixens who throw themselves at Brother Xylan," she raised her eyebrows and said loudly, "I will skin them alive." What kind of girl is she? How can she be so violent all the time? Su Jingfu said this, but he had no intention of stopping Su Pingting. The seemingly warm image of this father and daughter filled his mind, and he couldn't help but bend over. His stomach churned with nausea, and he retched a few times. Before he went to the Su residence today, Chu Zhao had asked Ding Xiang to stay in the room. In fact, after returning to Shuo capital, he had asked Ding Xiang to stay in the Chu residence and not go out unless there were other circumstances. Now that the marriage between him and Su Pingting was almost out in the open, Ding Xiang would be in even more danger. When he was young, he became the disciple of Su Jingfu. Thanks to Su Jingfu, Madame Chu did not dare to act against him as openly as before. Su Jingfu also treated him well. For a child, he gave Chu Zhao enough face. Because he was Su Jingfu's student, it was convenient for him to interact with others. As Su Jingfu's daughter, Su Pingting was about the same age as him. In the beginning, Chu Zhao didn't hate her as much. When Su Pingting was a teenager, she was already the apple of the Su family's eye. She could get whatever she wanted. Other than being a little arrogant, she treated Chu Zhao very well. She always followed behind Chu Zhao like a tail, calling him Brother Xylan. Sometimes she would tell Chu Zhao, Pingting will marry Brother Xylan in the future. Brother Xylan belongs to Pingting alone. He took it as a joke until Chu Zhao was 14 years old. Chu Linfeng was famous for being a handsome man in Xiao Zhongwu's generation. Even if he didn't become Shi Jinbo, he could still win the hearts of many girls with his good looks. Chu Zhao's mother, Yi Runmei, was also beautiful. Chu Zhao modeled himself after the couple. When he was 14 years old, he was as beautiful as the two brothers in the Xiao family. His personality was gentle and considerate, and he knew how to take care of people. Many girls secretly fell in love with him. Among them, there was a young lady named Qian. She was fiery and passionate, and her eyes were very charming. She was different from the other shy girls in the Shuo capital. After meeting a few times, she directly expressed her feelings to Chu Zhao. Of course, Chu Zhao rejected her, but she didn't give up. She didn't pester him, but she sent things to the Chu family every few days. Occasionally, when they met in the Shuo capital, Miss Qian didn't refute. She just stared at him, making him feel helpless. Not long after, something happened to Miss Qian. It was said that she was killed by thieves when she was out on a walk with her friends. Her death was very tragic. Her eyes were gouged out, shocking the entire capital. Miss Qian's father was only a minor 7th-rank official. After reporting it to the authorities, they couldn't find the murderer. When Chu Zhao heard the news, he was stunned for a long time. He couldn't believe that the girl who always winked at him had died so quietly. Later, half a year after the incident, he went to the Su family to find Su Jingfu. When he passed by the small hall, he heard Su Pingting talking to the servant next to her. She's just a lowly commoner. How dare she compete with me? She doesn't know how much she's worth. I'll gouge out her eyes. Let's see how she can seduce Brother Xylan in the future. If there's another woman who doesn't have eyes pestering Brother Xylan in the future, I won't be merciful like before. The girl's laughter was soft and innocent, but it was full of malice. Just like that, she completely destroyed another girl of her age. Chu Zhao's heart was cold from head to toe. But now he was going to be tied to this woman and grow old together. How ironic was that? He slowly sat up straight. One night, when he was still in the Liang province guards, Lin Qingtan's grandson, the white-robed divine hand Lin Shuanghe, had said something to him. Fourth young Master Chu, if you care about little sister you should stay away from her. You have a tigress in your family, but our little sister he doesn't want to be the second Miss Qian. His eyes changed unpredictably. There was a flat shirtu lying next to the pen holder. The shirtu was in the shape of a horse. It seemed that he could see through the shirtu and see the night sky. The girl casually wiped the sweat on her forehead, took a knife and seriously chopped down. Then she handed the shirtu to him. Whose voice was it? It was bright and clear, as clean as a spring stream. Zhao, it means radiance. Xylan means vanilla. The person who gave you this name must have loved you very much. They hoped that you would have a noble character and a bright future. That's why they gave you such an elegant name. He had already stayed in the darkness for many years. But when the first ray of light appeared, even though he knew that it didn't belong to him, he still wanted to greedily hold it in his hand. He deliberately woke up a little late the next morning. After eating breakfast and greeting Bai Gua, He Yin leisurely left the room. It had already been a few days since she last went to the Su family. It seemed that the manservant called Fu Wang had been looking at her with longing these past few days. As for the rest of His Majesty's reward money, she kept it all in her sleeve. When dealing with people, money was indispensable. Although she was now a small official, she didn't have much money. If she bribed people a few more times, she wouldn't have any extra money. He Yin wondered if he should go find Lin Shuanghe to borrow some money, and then go to Lutong village to make a few rounds. But last time, he won money at Lutong village and offended the banker. If he went this time, he was afraid that he would be refused at the door. While thinking about the serious problem of where to get the money, He Yin had already arrived at the tea house where she met Fu Wang. She first smiled and gave the waiter at the entrance of the tea house some broken silver. She casually asked, "Has anyone come to see me these past few days?" The waiter quickly took the broken silver and smiled. "Yes, yes, yes. The little brother who came with young master last time has been coming 3 times a day these past few days. If you sit down, I reckon that he will come again soon." He Yin smiled. "Then I'll have to trouble little brother to bring a pot of tea." After saying that, she walked to the elegant room where they met last time and sat down. After giving Fu Wang the cold shoulder for so long, He Yin had already guessed that Fu Wang would most likely be unable to restrain himself, but she didn't expect that he would be so impatient. However, this was a good thing for her. Su Zhiheng's method of buying people's hearts was too poor. Or perhaps he only cared about buying the people above him, and forgot to win over the people below him. Sure enough, He Yin hadn't even sat for a quarter of an hour when someone came outside and knocked on the door. He Yin said, "Please come in." The door was pushed open. Fu Wang closed the door and walked in with large strides. "Young master." Seeing He Yin, this person was very excited. "This little one thought that you weren't in Shuajing. These past few days have been really worrying me to death." He Yin reached out to him. "Sit." When Fu Wang sat down, she slowly opened her mouth. "These past few days, I have important matters to attend to. Only today did I have the time to come here." She poured a cup of tea for Fu Wang and said in a very gentle tone, "Little brother is so anxious to find me. Is there any news?" "News, naturally there is." Fu Wang revealed a difficult expression. He Yin understood tacitly and placed an ingot of silver in front of him. "Young master is a kind person." "Thank you, young master." Fu Wang beamed with joy and put the ingot into his pocket before saying, "Young master wanted to inquire about the matter. This little one has been paying attention in the Fu. It's just that when concubine mother he was in trouble, the group of servants in concubine mother he's courtyard were all gone. Some left the Fu, some were sold. In the end, no one was left. This little one also pieced together some information from the servants in the other courtyards." He lowered his voice and looked around nervously. "Actually, those servants are all dead." When he said this, he deliberately wanted to look at He Yan's expression. Unfortunately, the face of the person sitting in front of him was covered by a veil, and he couldn't see clearly. However, seeing that he could still calmly drink his tea, he didn't look very surprised. "Young master, do you know what the situation would be if all the servants in a courtyard were executed?" He Yin smiled slightly, silencing people. He originally wanted to keep him in suspense, but he didn't think that he would be seen through in one glance. Fu Wang was a bit discouraged and didn't have the same intention of keeping him in suspense like before. He answered honestly, "That is indeed the case. This little one heard that concubine mother he had committed an unforgivable crime. Therefore, the so-called punishment of the family law was actually to kill her. The servants in her courtyard all knew the truth, so they didn't have a way to live." When Fu Wang heard about this from other people, he felt a chill down his spine when he thought about it now. Even if the servants in the courtyard were sold into the hands of their masters, dozens of lives, even if it was reported to the Shua capital, it was still a big matter. Moreover, the Su family was a scholarly family, yet they could still kill dozens of people without batting an eyelid. It was unavoidably frightening. It also made people curious. What kind of crime did concubine mother he commit? Adultery? That wouldn't be to the extent of killing all the servants in the courtyard. There were also guards in the courtyard. It couldn't be that when concubine mother he was having an affair with someone. Those guards were still outside watching? To be able to let everyone in the courtyard know. And to have people die to keep the secret. What kind of crime was it? Is that all? Yan asked. Fu Wang said, that's all. Yan smiled. Little brother, the things you said seem to be secrets, but in reality, they are of no help to my matter. If that's all you found, then there's no need for us to continue this transaction. She stood up. These days I've troubled you. It's been hard on you. After she finished speaking, she acted as if she was about to leave without any reluctance. Fu Wang's heart tightened and he blurted out. Gongzi, please wait. As soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted it. Doing business. Sometimes it wasn't just about doing business. It was about who was more patient. He was afraid that he would lose this money tree. So he spoke out to urge her to stay, but he also exposed himself. Yan turned her head to look at him. Could it be that little brother still has some information that you haven't finished speaking? Knowing that he had been seen through by the person in front of him, Fu Wang braced himself and said, Gongzi, please sit down and talk. Yan smiled and sat down again. Actually, this little one heard that among the servants who were executed at that time, there might be one person who is still alive. Yan smiled and said, continue. That person is concubine mother He's wet nurse, Qin Momo. Before concubine mother He's accident, her wet nurse said that she was going home to see her grandson, but she didn't return to the Fu after some time. Concubine mother He sent people to check, but that wet nurse's family said that she didn't return. After that, the Fu also looked for her, but there was no news. Fu Wang said, this little one thinks that Qin Momo might still be alive. Yan looked at him without speaking. Fu Wang was a bit uneasy. Gongzi, since you said that no one can find Qin Momo now, Yan wasn't in a hurry, slowly saying, then little brother might not be able to find her either. A person who has disappeared without a trace. Even if she's still alive in this world, without any news, what value does she have? Fu Wang was inwardly shocked. Could it be that the person in front of him had the ability to read minds? He did find out a bit of Qin Momo's whereabouts, and he had spent a large amount of money to get this information. However, this transaction today was done by him wanting to use the other party, and the other party could leave at any time. If he couldn't show full sincerity, he was afraid that this person wouldn't meet him in the future. Thinking of this, Fu Wang steeled his heart. This little one heard that this Qin Momo has been a widow for a long time. When she was the wet nurse for concubine mother she had a lover. Other people don't know about this. Only a servant girl in the Fu who boils water knows. That lover now lives outside the city. This little one wants to give it a try. Perhaps Qin Momo is still alive. That's more like it. Yan's heart calmed down a bit, and there was a bit of praise in his tone. My eyes were right. Little brother is really amazing. Other people couldn't find out, but you found out. She said. Then I'll wait here for good news. If little brother finds out Qin Momo's whereabouts, you must not act rashly and alert the enemy. Just secretly tell me. She said. After this matter, this one can help little brother get rid of his slave status. At that time, you just need to take a large amount of money and leave Shuajing. In the future, you will naturally be able to sit back and relax. These words made Fu Wang's heart beat faster. I still have important matters to attend to, so I won't accompany little brother any longer. Yan stood. Little brother can stay here and drink tea and eat snacks before going back. Gongzi, wait. Fu Wang's voice came from behind him. Yan just turned around when he felt that someone was already in front of him, trying to lift his curtain hat. But in the next moment, that hand was easily clamped down by Yan. Fu Wang. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Yan released his hand and continued to walk forward without looking back. He only said, little brother, if you want to see my face, you don't have to be in a hurry. When the dust settles, I will take off my veiled hat. The door was closed, and the elegant room was empty. It was as if the spy just now was just a dream. Only the 2 teacups on the table indicated that someone had been here. Fu Wang sat down at the table and drank tea to suppress the fear in his heart. This mysterious person who knew the Su family like the back of his hand. What was his identity? After leaving the tea room, Yan's mood was much more relaxed. Under the curtain hat, A smile gradually spread. He didn't expect that Fu Wang's side would be so smooth. The people who had witnessed the truth in the courtyard had really survived. Since that Qin Mama could predict that Su Zhiheng would kill people to silence them, she must be a smart person. Smart people who ran for their lives might have some trump cards on them. Su Zhiheng had calculated everything, but he probably didn't expect that Qin Mama would run away. After all, her children and grandchildren were in Jing. If she ran away, the Su family wouldn't let her family go. But Su Zhiheng also missed one point. When people faced death, no one wouldn't be afraid. The desire to survive was greater than anything else. In this world, there would be people who would sacrifice themselves to protect their family. And there would also be selfish people who would run for their lives in the face of disaster. And with Qin Mama running away, her family would be safer. If Su Zhiheng took the lives of her children and grandchildren, it was possible that Qin Mama would tell the truth to the world in revenge. If she disappeared without a trace, Su Zhiheng would be more cautious. She had to find Qin Mama faster than Su Zhiheng and He Rufei. Today's matter had gone smoothly. He Yan was happy and returned home a bit early. Before he reached the courtyard, he heard a familiar voice. "Younger sister, where did that older brother he go? You really don't know?" Wen Baigua stood up. She only reached his waist. She looked up and answered, "Second young master didn't let us ask about young master he." Lin Shuanghe closed his fan. "Your second young master is quite thoughtful." He Yan called out to him from afar, "Brother Lin." Lin Shuanghe turned his head. When he saw her, his eyes immediately lit up. He quickly walked over. "I just got here, and was wondering why you weren't here. You came back just in time. Brother He, I came especially to find you." He Yan hadn't seen him since returning to Shuajing. Lin Shuanghe was dressed much more ostentatiously than when he was in the Liangzhou Guard. He was still wearing his clothes when he was in the military camp. Now that he was back in Shuajing, even the red-crowned crane eyes on his clothes were embellished with tiny gemstones. He wore fragrant balls and jade belts. Not a single one was missing. "Brother Lin, have you found a residence?" He Yan was still thinking about the matter he had asked this person to do. Unexpectedly, as soon as he said this, Lin Shuanghe choked. It was clear that he had long forgotten about this matter. He laughed awkwardly. "A residence? It hasn't been easy to find recently. I want to find a satisfactory one for Brother He. Naturally, I can't be careless. And I'm here for other matters. Let's go inside and talk." He Yan was speechless. He led Lin Shuanghe inside. After closing the door, Lin Shuanghe walked around the room and sighed. "Not bad. Isn't this residence right next to Huaijin? I think it's better than the Liangzhou Guard. Younger sister He, are you living well here? If there's anything inconvenient, don't hesitate to tell Huaijin. Don't let yourself suffer." He spoke as if this wasn't the Xiao family, but the Lin family. He Yan poured him a cup of hot water. "Brother Lin, you didn't come to find me just to see how I'm living, right?" "Oh." Lin Shuanghe slapped his head. "I almost forgot." He took out an invitation from his sleeve and handed it to He Yan. "An invitation to the palace banquet. Here. Huaijin has left the city. I'm afraid he won't be able to make it back on that day. Before he left, he had someone tell me to remember to take care of you. In 3 days, I'll come to the Xiao residence to pick you up. At that time, you'll come with me to the palace. This is your first time entering the palace. If no one leads you, I'm afraid it won't be very convenient." He Yan was startled. "The governor has left the city?" "Yes, he left the city today. He left in a hurry and had his people bring me a message. Originally, he planned to bring you with him to the palace banquet. However, he won't be able to make it back in time this time, so he asked me to do it for him." He Yan recalled that Xiao Ju had indeed told him that she would be leaving the city in a few days. However, he hadn't expected it to be so hurried that he didn't even have time to say goodbye. However, he really kept his promise. He said he would bring him to the palace banquet, and he really did. "What are you thinking about, younger sister He?" Lin Shuanghe waved his hand in front of her face. "When I came today, I even brought some clothes. When you go to the palace, you have to wear something more glamorous. You don't know how the people in the palace treat dishes according to the plate. You might have to walk around the palace often in the future. The first time you go, you have to leave a deep impression. I had the servants buy these. Each piece is made of good material, and is very gorgeous. You can choose one to wear. It won't be a disgrace to hygiene. Ian. Thank you very much. Also, younger sister I reckon that since Huijin brought you to the palace this time, His Majesty might reward you greatly. After all, you have done a lot of meritorious service in the past. Don't be too surprised if you become an official or something. That I'll just say it first. It's not certain. He rambled on about a bunch of things to pay attention to at the palace banquet. When the servant came to urge him to hurry to the next social event, he stood up and bid farewell. After Lin Shuanghe left, Yan sat down in front of the mirror. The clothes he had the servants bring were on the table. They were new and tidy, and the embroidery was exquisite. Yan looked at himself in the mirror. In her previous life, before she entered the palace, she had already returned to her female identity. Therefore, the person who entered the palace was Hirufei, the person who met His Majesty was Hirufei, and the person who received the title of Feihong was also Hirufei. Now, she was finally going to enter the palace again as Hien. Thinking about it, Su Jiheng and Hirufei would both be present at the palace banquet this time. Perhaps she would even see He Yuanliang and He Yuansheng. Those people who had been entangled with her in her previous life had finally reappeared in front of her. And in such a way, the girl in the mirror had already changed her face. Her facial features were not the least bit similar to before. Only that pair of eyes were burning with a raging flame, as if they wanted to burn all evil to ashes. They were as bright as ever. Hien lowered her head, not knowing what to think. After a while, she slowly raised the corners of her mouth and smiled. 3 days later, Hirufei Su Jiheng and the He family would get to know the name Hien again. When they met an old friend who had passed away, they didn't know if they had a guilty conscience. When they heard this name again, would they be so scared that they wouldn't be able to sleep at night? Perhaps it was a good thing that Xiao Ju wasn't around. She could be even more fearless. Chapter 199. Night shrouded the wilderness. In the thatched hut, someone was hiding in the corner. His lips were moving, but no one knew what he was saying. Young master, we found them. Su Jingfu's men are chasing after them. These 2 brothers are a bit delirious now. We might have to bring them back to the city for young Master Lin to take a look. Luaning stood beside Xiao Ju and said in a low voice. These were the survivors of the Battle of Mingshui. In the Battle of Mingshui, Xiao Zhongwu's soldiers were almost completely annihilated. Among them, apart from Chai Anshi, no one else survived. And the soldiers who were still alive also died one after another. As for how they died, and whether there was anything strange about their deaths, no one cared anymore. It had been 5 years since the Battle of Mingshui. Perhaps in this world, apart from Xiao Zhongwu's son, no one would care about the dead General Guangwu and the sinister plot hidden in that famous defeat. Is there no other way? Xiao Ju frowned. Like this, I'm afraid they won't be able to hold on until we return to the city. When we came out, we were in a hurry and only brought medicine for injuries. We didn't bring anything to calm the mind. Luaning shook her head. Su Jingfu's men chased them for 7 days and 7 nights. They didn't sleep and didn't rest, so they couldn't hold on. Of course, a war of attrition was very tiring. Especially a war of attrition like this. Xiao Ju thought for a moment, and took a sachet from his waist. It was the sachet made by Bai Rongwei that Hien gave him. He held the sachet and pulled open the string. Inside, there was a very small protective talisman, and some medicinal herbs. According to Hien, it was very important to focus the mind. Xiao Ju poured out the medicinal herbs and gave them to Luaning. Let them smell it. We won't leave tonight. Let them rest for a night in another place. Luaning agreed. After investigating Su Jingfu and the Mingshui case for so long, they finally found 2 living witnesses. It wasn't easy, but this also showed that Xiao Ju's ability had gradually grown to the point where he could compete with Su Jingfu. For example, this time he won the kidnapping. He couldn't stay here for long. He had to find another place. After finding a house outside the city, everyone, including the 2 delirious brothers, settled down. Qi Wu and Fei Nu stood guard in front of the brothers' door to prevent any accidents during the night. Luaning went out to scout for information. Nights in the suburbs were always exceptionally cold and cheerless, especially during autumn, when there was rarely any sign of human habitation within a dozen-li radius. The moon was white and bright, shining down on the empty wilderness like flowing silver water, giving rise to a sense of desolation for no reason. Actually, he didn't like the Mid-Autumn Festival. This was because the Mid-Autumn Festival always reminded him of very bad memories of the past. The more perfect the moon was, the lonelier it seemed. Every year around this time, he would find it hard to fall asleep. In the past, when he was in the barracks, he could read documents for half the night. Now that he was back in Shuajing, there was nothing he could do. Xiaoju lowered her head and looked at the sachet in her hand. The medicinal herbs in the sachet had been emptied, leaving only a flat layer. The protective talisman was small. After thinking for a while, he opened the sachet, intending to put the protective talisman back in. Although it was embroidered by a servant of the Xiao family, the silk material and patterns were personally chosen by Bai Rongwei. Bai Rongwei was always very persistent on this matter, so the sachet was especially exquisite. Her fingers touched it, and the silk was as cold as moonlight. Xiaoju's gaze paused for a moment. In the next moment, her fingertips brushed against the inside of the sachet, touching a rough protrusion. This protrusion on the smooth surface of the sachet was particularly different. She lowered her eyes and turned the sachet over. The inside appeared in front of Xiaoju. The inside of the sachet was embroidered with 2 layers. It was a double-layer embroidery, and the inner layer was a normal black cloth without any patterns. However, at this moment, there was a crooked, bright yellow horn embroidered on the inner layer. It was impossible to tell what it was, but it could be seen that the embroiderer's skill was not very good. The thread was not even cut clean. How to say it? The black python outside the sachet and the yellow horn inside the sachet did not seem to be the same thing. What did this mean? Xiaoju raised an eyebrow. Bai Rongwei's skill was much better than this. If the Xiao family's servants' needlework looked like this, it would be a bit scary if word got out. This sachet was given to him by He Yan. In the entire Xiao family, other than Lady He, there was no one else who could make needlework like this. He turned the sachet over and over again, trying to find traces of other things that He Yan embroidered. However, there was nothing. Other than this yellow horn, she did not embroider anything else. Xiaoju's mouth twitched. Was she using his sachet to practice her skills? She also practiced it so sneakily and silently. If he did not need to take the herbs inside to open the sachet, he was afraid that he would never discover the secret inside. But what was the point of doing this? If she really wanted to practice, she could find a white handkerchief and embroider it endlessly, hiding it inside. He always felt that there was a deeper meaning that he did not understand. Just at this time in the wilderness, there was the sound of footsteps. A 12 or 13-year-old boy walked up to him and said with a smile, "Young master." This child was Luan Ying's son, called Bai Xian. He had handsome features and looked very similar to Luan Ying. However, he was young and his cheeks were a bit chubby, making him look simple and honest and cute. Unlike Luan Ying's cold temperament, Bai Xian was like any other boy his age. He was naive and even a bit talkative. He liked Xiaoju very much. No matter how many times Luan Ying warned him not to be impudent, Bai Xian did not remember. Xiaoju did not care about these things. Therefore, whenever Luan Ying did not look, Bai Xian would try to find a way to stick to Xiaoju whenever he saw her. Bai Xian saw the sachet in Xiaoju's hands. His eyes were good. In the darkness, he could see the embroidery on the cloth clearly. He blurted out, "This moon embroidery is so beautiful." Moon. Xiaoju was stunned. Bai Xian answered confidently, "Young master, look. It's yellow and curved. It's the moon." He moved closer and stood on his tiptoes to observe the embroidery in Xiaoju's hands. He praised, "This is a black lining. It represents the night. This moon is embroidered on it. It represents the moon in the night. Young master, you are the moon in the night. You are the moon in the night. Dazzling, dazzling." The more the child spoke, the more excited he became. He whispered mysteriously, "Young master, is this a gift from Miss?" Xiaoju was speechless. He was a bit uncomfortable and took back the sachet. No. How could it not be? Bai Xian was very confused. If it wasn't a girl, How could a man embroider such exquisite embroidery? Xiao Ju wondered if Bai Xian was He Yan's biological brother. It was rare that they had the same evaluation of beauty. Bai Xian wanted to ask more, but a voice suddenly exploded behind him. Bai Xian. Bai Xian was so scared that he quickly hid behind Xiao Ju. Mother. I came out to use the toilet and just happened to see young master. Wanning grabbed him by the ear and pulled him out from behind Xiao Ju. How many times have I told you not to disturb young master? Why is this child so immature? Young master, I'm sorry. I'll take him back now. Wanning carried the white pheasant back, leaving Xiao Ju alone in the wilderness. The moonlight shone on the black wilderness. The soil was covered with white frost. It was like the snow by the Wei River in Liang Province, pouring into the cold. The emotionless moon was like a dream. He curved his lips and turned to leave. Suddenly he paused as if he thought of something and looked up. In his memory, there was a girl whose face was hidden under a mask in the midst of a lively and laughing crowd. She was chatting nonchalantly on a high platform. The last secret. She stood on her tiptoes and leaned close to his chin. She said softly, I like the moon. The moon doesn't know. The day of entering the palace arrived quickly. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei also wanted to enter the palace. When they found out that He Yan didn't go with them, but with Lin Shuanghe, they were a bit surprised. However, they were very considerate and didn't ask much. When Lin Shuanghe's carriage arrived, they sent He Yan to the carriage and told him to meet again in the palace. Lin Shuanghe sat in the carriage and waved his fan. Huaijin is probably afraid that you won't get along with Brother Ruby. We're all old friends, so it'll be easier for us to get along. He looked at He Yan again and sighed. It's Huaijin's loss that he didn't come back today. Our He Mimi looks so handsome in such gorgeous men's clothing. If you go to the palace with me, no one among the civil and military officials will be able to steal our light. He Yan was thinking about other things and gave a perfunctory reply. Lin Shuanghe saw this scene and thought that she was nervous because it was her first time entering the palace. He comforted her. Don't be afraid, He Mimi. I'm here. I'm very familiar with the palace. You can do whatever you want. As long as you don't kill or set fire. You can find my grandfather to settle it. He was already very good at setting up his father and grandfather, so he brought He Yan along as well. The carriage sped along. After an unknown amount of time, they finally arrived at the palace gates. The imperial bodyguards in front of the palace were already very familiar with Lin Shuanghe's carriage. Lin Shuanghe and He Yan got off the carriage and followed the palace attendant inside. This was He Yan's first time entering the palace. If it was at this time in her previous life, she would be nervous because she could see the emperor and be rewarded. But after dying once, she knew that the so-called future and riches were fleeting clouds. She didn't enter the palace for the future, but for a debt from her previous life. Bypassing the palace's long corridor and garden, they walked past the front hall. The emperor's banquet this time was nothing more than a celebration. The people who came were all important people in the imperial court. For example, Lin Shuanghe could also sneak in because of his relationship with Lin Qingtan and Lin Mu. In the front hall, there were already many people. He Yan looked around and didn't see Xiao Jing and his wife's shadow. Lin Shuanghe said in a low voice, We took the shortcut. Brother Ruby should have taken the main road, so he might be a bit late. It's okay, He Yan. I'll follow you. When someone comes to greet you, I'll tell them your name. It'll help you get to know some people. As soon as he finished speaking, someone said, Lin Shuanghe. However, this person didn't come to get to know He Yan, because this person was Yanhe. Yanhe was wearing his official robe. The woman standing next to him was elegant and gentle. Her appearance couldn't be considered stunning, but it was very pleasant to look at. She bowed from Lin Shuanghe. Young Master Lin. This was Yanhe's wife, Xia Qingxiu. Qingxiu was a person who did things as he pleased. Under everyone's gaze, he put his arm around Xia Qingxiu's shoulder and pouted at He Yan. Qingxiu, this is the confidant I told you about. He hates He Rufei as much as I do. However, he's now Xiao Huaijin's man. He looked at He Yan. Do you want to work for me? Before He Yan could speak, Lin Shuanghe waved his hand righteously. No. Of course, this kind of thing has to be faithful to the end. How can you change people halfway through? Yanhe was confused. You have to be faithful to the end? Could it be that you're such a fickle person in your heart? Lin Shuanghe looked at Xia Qingxiu. Sister-in-law, I'm worried about you. Xia Qingxiu. Yan he was furious. Lin Shuanghe, shut up. How can you sow discord like this? Lin Shuanghe. It's good that you know. Yan he cursed and left with Xia Qingxiu. Lin Shuanghe heaved a sigh of relief. He turned his head and was about to ask He Yan, but he saw that He Yan was staring blankly in a direction. Lin Shuanghe followed her gaze and saw that not far away, there were people talking. Standing in the middle was a young man in a long robe. He was refined and handsome. He was no stranger. This was the Hanlin Academy scholar Su Zhiheng. Lin Shuanghe was a little puzzled. He Yan was staring at Su Zhiheng. Those who didn't know better would think that she had taken a liking to him. However, Su Zhiheng was already married. Moreover, in terms of refinement and handsome, Chu Zhao wasn't bad either. Compared to Chu Zhao, Su Zhiheng was far inferior. Could it be that she couldn't get Chu Zhao and was looking for a substitute? Lin Shuanghe's mind was a mess. On the other side, Su Zhiheng seemed to have noticed that someone was looking at him. He followed the gaze and looked over. Yan was a stranger here. Su Zhiheng had never seen her before, but he recognized Lin Shuanghe. Lin Shuanghe didn't have an official position. Lin Qingtan and Lin Muji were good at conducting themselves in the imperial court. Most of the officials in the imperial court were on good terms with the Lin family. At least, they wouldn't take the initiative to make enemies. Seeing that Lin Shuanghe was also looking at him, Su Zhiheng was a little surprised at first. Then, he temporarily left his colleagues who were talking to him, and walked over to Lin Shuanghe. Brother Lin. He stopped in front of Lin Shuanghe and said warmly, long time no see. Lin Shuanghe recognized Su Zhiheng, but they were just acquaintances. They weren't familiar with each other. However, he was a shrewd person. He took advantage of the situation and said, yes, I went to Liangzhou for a while. Our Shuajing is still the best. Oh right, this is a brother I met in Liangzhou. He Yan raised her eyes to look at Su Zhiheng. It had been more than 2 years since she last saw Su Zhiheng. In her memory, Su Zhiheng was a gentle and considerate man. At the very least, he was a handsome young master with a face that could completely deceive people. Now that she looked at him again, she didn't know if it was because the face reflected the heart, but Su Zhiheng's face had become a lot harsher. He had lost a lot of weight. His official's robe was already loose, so it made him look even more stooped. Because he was too thin and weak, his face also looked a little old. Even the smile he deliberately squeezed out looked exceptionally stiff. Su Zhiheng was also sizing up the person in front of him. This was a very delicate and pretty young man. His eyebrows were full of heroic spirit. His red round-necked robe made his lips red and his teeth white. A black belt around his waist outlined his extremely beautiful figure. The most attractive thing was his eyes. They were clearly gentle, but his gaze was sharp. This young man had been staring at him from afar. It was clearly the first time they had met, but his gaze seemed to surge with all kinds of emotions. It was cold and gloomy, as if he could see through all of his disguises. He couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate. Su Zhiheng felt uncomfortable being stared at like this. He turned to Lin Shuanghe. This is Lord Su, don't look at this little brother's young age. He has already been personally conferred the title of Muan Lang by Her Majesty. His name is He Yan. In the future, he will be our colleague. Su Zhiheng originally had a smile on his face as he listened to Lin Shuanghe's words. When he heard the last part, his smile disappeared in a flash. He asked, you said what is his name? Lord Su. He Yan looked at him with a smile. This one is called He Yan. He as in He Miao, and Yan as in He Qinghai. Su Zhiheng's expression changed greatly. The corners of the young man's lips were slightly raised. He looked friendly and inexperienced. However, when he looked carefully at his eyes, there wasn't the slightest hint of a smile. It was like a pool of ice-cold water that brought people to an afternoon when a young woman was struggling to fall into a bottomless abyss. The oppressive feeling of suffocation rose up his throat. His throat was dry, and he couldn't say a complete sentence. Fortunately, at this time, someone called Lin Shuanghe's name. It was Lin Qingtan. Lin Shuanghe dragged He Yan away. He said, Brother He, that's my grandfather. I'll take you to see him. The person in front of him left. Su Zhiheng almost suspected that the name he had just heard was a dream, caused by his uneasiness. However, when he looked up, the young man standing beside Lin Shuanghe in the distance and talking to Lin Qingtan reminded him that this was reality. There really was a person called He Yan in front of him. Su Zhiheng was drenched in cold sweat. A colleague noticed his abnormality and asked with concern, "Lord Su, what's the matter? Why is your face so ugly? Are you not feeling well?" Su Zhiheng forced a smile and waved his hand. "It's nothing." He turned and walked to an empty corner, not daring to let others see his shock. He curled his fingers and did his best to convince himself. So what if he was called He Yan? In this world, there were many people with the same name. Young Mistress Su was already dead. He had personally seen her being sealed into a coffin. This He Yan was a man. Moreover, he didn't look very old, so it shouldn't match. But that young man called He Yan, the way he stared at him, made Su Zhiheng's back crawl with chills when he thought about it. Indifference, hatred, mockery, and in an instant, it turned into a smile as if he had seen through everything. Moreover, he had said those words. When he first saw He Yan, or rather, when he first saw He Yan with his real name, that girl was wearing a skirt and said rather uncomfortably, "My surname is He, first name is Yan. He as in He Miao, Yan as in He Qinghai." Su Zhiheng closed his eyes. How could there be such a coincidence? How could such a coincidence happen in front of him? This was really. He Yan, who was not far away, saw his uneasiness and sneered in his heart. Wang Ba always said that if one walked in the dark for too long, they would encounter ghosts. He originally thought that this person was too timid, but now it seemed that his words were not without reason. For example, Sun Ling and his son in Liangzhou City had committed countless evil deeds. Countless women had died in their hands, but they were still afraid of evil spirits coming for their lives, so they filled their courtyard with Buddha statues and divine talismans. Lin Shuanghe was very popular. Wherever he went, he couldn't help but exchange greetings with people. He Yan followed beside him, matching the positions of these people with their faces. Where they were, what they were doing. When the battlefield changed to the imperial court, the general would never fight an unprepared battle. At this moment someone shouted, "General Fei Hong is here, General Fei Hong is here." The officials present quieted down and looked in the direction of the outer gate. It had to be said that the two great generals of the Great Way, Fei Hong and Feng Yun, were always eye-catching no matter the time. Today Xiao Ju couldn't come, so He Rufei was the only eye-catching person. Yan He, who was standing at the side, snorted and said disdainfully, "He's not the emperor. Is there a need to put on such airs?" Xia Qingxiu tugged at his sleeve, and Yan He stopped talking. He Yan followed the crowd and looked in the direction of the outer gate. Following the palace servant's lead, someone walked in. This man was wearing the official robes of a military general. He was quite handsome and had the unique style and roughness of a military general. When someone greeted him, he would nod in response. He seemed to be friendly, but he also maintained a sense of alienation. This bit of estrangement made this General Fei Hong seem even more mysterious. "Tisk," He Yan heard Lin Shuanghe say. "This kid was quite cute when he was young. Why is he becoming more and more unlikable as he grows? How is he different from those old fellows who have been in the bureaucracy for many years?" He added softly, "The bureaucracy is a big divat. Fortunately, I'm not an official." This was the first time He Yan saw He Rufei like this in front of his colleagues in court. With the name of General Fei Hong, he lived like a fish in water without any burden. It was as if he was General Fei Hong from start to finish. He Yan felt disgusted. Perhaps it was because his gaze was too focused that He Rufei also seemed to sense it and looked towards him. The moment their eyes met, He Yan turned his head and spoke to Lin Shuanghe. He Rufei only saw an unfamiliar youth standing next to Lin Shuanghe. Maybe it was his imagination? He Rufei didn't take it to heart and found a good colleague to sit with. Of course, he got to know his good colleagues after he took off his mask. In the past, he had nothing to do with them. As for Su Zhiheng, in front of outsiders, they weren't close. Everyone knew that He Rufei and He Xining were very close as siblings. However, towards this brother-in-law of theirs, they could only be considered as friends of a gentleman. After all, one was a civil official while the other was a military official. Even if they wanted to be intimate, there was nothing they could talk about. He Yin knew this wasn't the case. They were just people with a guilty conscience. They were afraid of being caught, so they did it on purpose. It seemed that they were very afraid of that matter being discovered. The more afraid they were, the more confident He Yin was. Lin Shuanghe said, "Let's sit down first." The men and women had to sit separately. However, there were very few women at this kind of palace banquet. Other than the madams that the Empress Dowager liked and their daughters, there was no one else. After some time, an eunuch came in to announce that Emperor Wenxuan had arrived. Chapter 200. This was the first time He Yin saw Emperor Wenxuan in his previous life. Emperor Wenxuan had reached the age of knowing his destiny, but he looked younger than he actually was. His face was ruddy, and he was neat and tidy. Although he wore a bright yellow dragon robe, he did not look as majestic and domineering as He Yin had imagined. He even looked kind and benevolent, like a kind elder in an ordinary family. He did not put on airs. After arriving, he sat down in the high seat, indicating that the officials did not need to be reserved. Sitting next to Emperor Wenxuan was Empress Zhang. Empress Zhang and Emperor Wenxuan were husband and wife when they were young. Their family was prominent, and the late emperor made her the crown princess. Empress Zhang had a son and a daughter. The current crown prince Guangyan and Princess Yuchan. Princess Yuchan was already married, but she was not feeling well recently, so she did not come to the palace banquet today. Sitting next to Empress Zhang was Imperial Concubine Lan. Imperial Concubine Lan was about the same age as Empress Zhang, but she was not as beautiful and round as Empress Zhang. She looked thin and delicate. She was gentle and did not fight for anything, so she gave birth to the fourth Prince Guangxua. Fifth Prince Guangji was held by a nanny and stood next to his two brothers. His biological mother was Imperial Concubine Anai. Imperial Concubine Anai was very young, and was at the age where she was as beautiful as a flower. She was arrogant and domineering. She was originally selected as the legitimate daughter of a local official, but because she was pregnant with the emperor's child, she rose up the ranks. However, Emperor Wenxuan disliked her arrogance and refused to promote her to the position of Imperial Concubine. In the past 2 years, Imperial Concubine Anai had become more well-behaved. The second prince and the third prince were originally a pair of twins. Emperor Wenxian was lucky enough to meet a palace maid who washed clothes in the palace. Unfortunately, it was difficult to give birth to twins. When the mother and the children were born, all 3 of them died together. Emperor Wenxuan did not have many children. In an imperial family, having many children was not necessarily a good thing. There was only one position, and when there were many people, it was inevitable that some people would be dissatisfied and disloyal. Now that 5th Prince Guangji was still young, only Crown Prince Guangji and 4th Prince Guangxua had the ability to sit in that position. Empress Zhang's family was powerful, and the Crown Prince was the legitimate heir. Coincidentally, the concubine Lan did not fight for the throne. Originally, it was understandable that the Crown Prince would inherit the throne. However, the Crown Prince was a Guangyan with neither talent nor virtue. He had no achievements in political affairs, and his own household was a mess. Usually he only knew how to play around. In contrast, the 4th prince was a Guangyan with both talent and virtue. He had outstanding talent, a gentle temperament, and kept himself clean. The Crown Prince was so weak, and the 4th prince was so outstanding. Naturally, there were people who were tempted. Moreover, among the 3,000 beauties in the imperial harem, Emperor Wenxian loved Concubine Lan the most. Although Concubine Lan did not fight or snatch, no one in the imperial harem dared to look down on her. Gradually, the power in the imperial court was divided into 2 factions. One faction supported the Guangyan, while the other faction wanted to ask Emperor Wenxian to make Guangxua the crown prince. He Yan still remembered that when he was in Liangzhou, he vaguely heard people say that the crown prince did not like Xiaoju. Xiaoju led the troops to the Liangzhou guard. In addition to avoiding Su Jingfu's sharp edge, the crown prince also played a part in it. In other words, Su Jingfu and the crown prince Guangyan were most likely in cahoots. She thought in her heart, but her expression did not change. 5th Prince Guangji was only 5 years old this year. Emperor Wenxian disliked noble lady Anai for being arrogant and leading a good child astray. Thus, he gave him to concubine Lan, and let concubine Lan raise him together. Noble Lady Anai was flustered and exasperated, but there was nothing she could do. Guangji had been raised by Noble Lady Lan for a long time, so he was very close to Guangshua. At this moment he was sitting at the table, tugging on Guangshua's sleeve and whispering, "Fourth brother, Imperial Father said today that he has a happy occasion to announce." "What is it?" Guangshua smiled and looked at him. "I don't know either. You'll find out later." Guangyan, who overheard their conversation, sneered, "Fourth brother, Imperial Father likes you so much. I thought you knew all of his secrets. Why didn't he tell you in advance this time?" Guangshua did not take the Crown Prince's provocation to heart. His attitude was still gentle. "Your Highness must be joking." Naturally, the undercurrent on their side was noticed by those who were observant. Emperor Wenxian was getting older and older. Some things were bound to happen sooner or later. He Yan sat at the men's table. She sat closer to Lin Shuanghe and Xiao Jing, but slightly further away from Yan He. He Rufei sat even further away. She could even feel Su Jihing secretly sizing her up. He Yan also saw Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao did not greet her today. He still spoke gently to others, but he treated He Yan like a stranger. He Yan did not care about this, but Chu Zhao seemed a little strange today. Not long after the banquet started, Empress Zhang spoke. She smiled and said, "Today is a good day. It's almost mid-autumn. I want to take advantage of today to do something good." Everyone looked at each other. They thought about the battle between the Rendu and Jiang. De Wei defeated Yudo. Today was supposed to be a celebratory banquet, but the main character, Xiao Huijin, was not present. If they were to reward He Rufei, then He Rufei's contribution in the Battle of Hua Yuan was not outstanding. If they were to reward him now, not only would it not make people feel honored, it would also be insulting. "Sure, Jinbo," Empress Zhang smiled and said, "It's time for the fourth young master of your residence to get married." Chu Linfeng was stunned. He stood up and quickly said, "Yes." Chu Zhao also stood up. "Chu Xilan, I know that you and Lord Su's daughter, Pingting, have been Qingmei's childhood sweetheart. I watched Pingting grow up. I also like you very much. The two of you are a match made in heaven. Today, I will do this good deed and betroth Pingting to you. What do you think?" Su Pingting was not at the banquet today. Only Chu Zhao heard this and knelt down. "Thank you for your favor, Your Majesty. I am very grateful." Su Jingfu also smiled and accepted the decree. He bowed and expressed his thanks. The banquet instantly became lively. The surrounding people also took the opportunity to express their thanks to Chu Linfeng and Su Jingfu. Chu Linfeng was very proud. He had 4 sons. The other 3 were average in appearance and talent. There was nothing special about them. Only this son, whose birth mother came from a small city, was stunning and outstanding. He was even able to become in-laws with the Prime Minister. If this news were to spread, he would be very proud. Chu Zhao also smiled and expressed his thanks. However, He Yan saw the smile on his face. He was not happy. Although she had not spent much time with Chu Zhao, this person often had a smile on his face. But now, even the fake smile was not as real as before. "Pitiful," Lin Shuanghe murmured in a low voice. At this time, one sentence is determined for life. He is no different from a puppet. He Yan turned to look at him. Lin Shuanghe knew that he had misspoken and hurriedly said with a smile, "Ku brother He, the Empress has said that the two of them are Qingmei's childhood sweethearts. Naturally, they should be together." He Yan did not say anything. Chu Zhao and Su Jingfu's relationship. Although they were teacher and student, Chu Zhao often had to rely on Su Jingfu to do things. Since he had chosen this path, he had to give up something. For example, freedom. Everyone had their own choices. She felt sympathy for Chu Zhao's situation. But wasn't this also Chu Zhao's own decision? Because of this happy event, the banquet was no longer as formal and lively as before. Seeing this, Emperor Wenshuan smiled and said, "Since this is the case, Zhen will also do a good deed today." Everyone at the banquet was shocked. What did this mean? Could it be that there was another happy event? Could it be that they were going to witness 2 happy events today? Since His Majesty and the Empress had personally bestowed a marriage, it could not be a small figure? Guang Ji's eyes lit up as he looked at Guang Shua. Fourth brother, who are you bestowing a marriage to this time? The crown prince also felt that it was strange. He knew about the matter between Su Pingting and Chu Xilan. The crown prince felt that it was a pity that Su Pingting, that girl, was born beautiful. However, he also knew that he already had a crown princess, and Su Jingfu definitely would not let his daughter be a secondary consort. As for Chu Xilan, he also needed to win over him. Therefore, he could only let Su Pingting benefit that brat Chu Xilan. Now, he had not received any news about the person Emperor Wen Xuan was bestowing a marriage. Where is He Yan of the Liangzhou guards? As soon as these words came out, everyone at the banquet was shocked. Lin Shuanghe looked at He Yan in surprise. How? He Yan was not worried at all. He stood up and walked forward confidently. He knelt down and kowtowed to Emperor Wen Xuan. This commoner He Yan greets His Majesty. Emperor Wen Xuan smiled and said, You are Muan Lang that Zhen has personally bestowed upon you. How can you call yourself a commoner? He Yan said, This humble subject knows his mistake. Su Zhihing and He Rufei, who were at the banquet, heard this name and looked at the youth in the hall at the same time. Yan He frowned and muttered to himself, What is going on now? Chu Zhao secretly clenched the teacup in his hand. On the other side, Shen Muxue, who was at the female side of the banquet, lowered her head. Her expression was dark and gloomy. Guang Ji asked, Who is this older brother? Guang Shui shook his head. The name He Yan was too unfamiliar. They had never seen this youth before. Only Muan Lang had some impression. He seemed to be Xiao Ju's subordinate when they were at the Liangzhou guards. He was someone who had performed meritorious deeds together with Xiao Ju. Zhen knows that you went to Jiang and the Rundu with General Fengyan. You were also there when Rida Muzi attacked the Liangzhou guards. The Jiang water battle and the Rundu defense were all your ideas. It is not easy for you to be brave and resourceful at such a young age. Zhen thinks that Muan Lang is not enough for you. Why don't I give you the title of Marquis? In the future, you will be Marquis Wuan. This. The courtiers looked at each other in dismay. From a nameless kid to a marquis, he did not have any important people behind him to recommend him. What kind of spectacle was this? Even General Fei Hong back then had someone in his family who was an official. What was this kid's background? How could he be so powerful? They did not see the memorials. Naturally, they did not know how the memorials from Jiang and the Runde detailed He Yan's crucial role in the battle. Emperor Wen Xian was a person who liked talents, especially young talents. This made him think of those geniuses in poetry and literature. To geniuses, the world and rules were restraints. This humble subject thanks your majesty for your grace. He Yan knelt down. His heart was extremely calm. What kind of luck did this kid have? Yan He gulped down the tea in his teacup and said gloomily, He rose faster than me. Lin Shuanghe was truly happy for He Yan. His face was about to burst into laughter. You can't. At this time, an abrupt voice interrupted. He Yan turned his head. An unfamiliar face appeared at the male side of the banquet. He Yan had never seen this person before. He did not look old, and was wearing an official's robe. This man's face showed impatience. He lifted the corner of his robe and walked forward. He also knelt down in front of Emperor Wen Xian. Your Majesty, you cannot confer him the marquis position. This kid is a liar. She is not a man, she is a woman. As if these words were not shocking enough, this person raised his hand and pulled out the wooden hairpin that bound He Yan's hair. Immediately, a head of long hair flowed down. They clearly had the same eyebrows and eyes, but at this moment, they were as elegant and beautiful as a woman. The youth knelt in the hall. His expression was extremely calm, without a hint of panic. On the other hand, the surrounding crowd was like boiling water. They instantly became rowdy. What's going on? Is she really a woman? Didn't they say she was a Liang province guard? There are women in the Liang province guard? Is she really a woman? This is the crime of deceiving the monarch. At the banquet, Chu Zhao's gaze focused on the young girl's back. The hands hidden in his sleeves secretly clenched into fists. Yin He could not hold back. He stood up with a whoosh and shouted, How is this possible? When Lin Shuanghe heard that person say no, he already had a bad feeling. When he said woman, he almost blacked out. However, he still persisted. At this moment, if he was not careful, he would be labeled as an accomplice in the crime of deceiving the monarch. Lin Shuanghe pressed down on his arm, indicating that he should not move. Lin Shuanghe's lips moved. His mind was quickly calculating how to get away with this. Insist that it was only a boy with a feminine appearance? Impossible. At this point, the nannies from the palace only needed to come over for a brief examination to reveal the truth. Should he just say that He Yan's brain was not working well, and that he mistook him for a woman and was spouting nonsense? That was not right either. If his brain was not working well, how could he deceive so many people? He had always had a lot of crooked ideas. At this moment he could not think of a single one. He anxiously scratched his head, not knowing what to do. Su Zhiheng and He Rufei at the banquet, although they were sitting in different positions, when they saw this scene, their hearts could not help but tremble. They almost screamed out loud. Being called He Yan was a coincidence. A woman dressed as a man entered the army, received meritorious service, and was even conferred the title of Marquis. How could it still be called a coincidence? If there was a next life, it would be like this. Su Zhiheng was very guilty. His body trembled. If Emperor Wenxian and his entourage were not here, he was afraid that he would immediately run away. This He Yan, who exactly was he? No one expected that a good reward would suddenly appear like this. Emperor Wenxian looked at He Yan. Muanlang, what do you say? This humble subject is indeed a woman, He Yan said. Your Majesty is very perceptive. This humble subject does not dare to hide anything. How could he admit it so openly and openly? The courtiers were in an uproar. Xin Muxia sat among the women and stared fixedly at the cup in front of her, as if she did not see this farce. However, if one looked carefully, her fingertips were slightly trembling. Xia Qingxiu sat next to her. Seeing Xin Muxia like this, he was a bit surprised, but he did not say anything. Empress Zhang also did not expect this to happen. A trace of surprise flashed across her face. However, Emperor Wenxian did not look shocked or angry. He only lowered his head and looked at He Yan. After a while, the emperor's voice sounded in the hall. Actually, I already knew that Muanlang was a woman. Xin Muxia suddenly raised her head. How could this be? Lin Shuanghe was also stunned. The courtiers were even more at a loss. After so many twists and turns, even watching a show was not as exciting as this. First, he revealed Muanlang's identity as a woman. Now, the emperor said that he already knew that Muanlang was a woman? What in the world was going on? Tu Zhao frowned slightly. Suddenly, he looked at Su Jingfu beside him. Su Jingfu had a kind smile on his face. He did not look surprised. Tu Zhao's thoughts flashed. He seemed to have caught a glimpse of something. It was Empress Zhang who opened her mouth and broke the silence. Your Majesty, you mean? The eunuch outside said loudly. General Fengyan has arrived. He Yan's heart skipped a beat. Why would Xiaoju come? Didn't he leave the city? Wouldn't he come today? Emperor Wenxian laughed. What's going on? Let beloved official Xiao say it herself. He Yan's heart trembled. This seemed to be different from what she had expected. Why would Xiaoju be involved in this? She clearly did not mention Xiaoju at all. Why did Emperor Wenxian's words mean that it was related to Xiaoju? Someone walked into the hall. The young governor had changed into a black court robe embroidered with gold. He was beautiful and elegant, like a new willow in spring. He was clearly a martial artist who had fought on the battlefield, but he did not look vulgar at all. He looked like a noble young master from the Shuo capital. The officials here paled in comparison. Xin Muxia stared at Xiaoju. Xiaoju walked to He Yan's side and knelt down. From the official's point of view, she and He Yan looked like a young couple who were kneeling down to greet their new wedding. Beloved official, you may rise. Emperor Wenxian glanced at He Yan. Muanlang, you may rise too. He Yan and Xiaoju stood up. Lin Shuanghe gripped the fan in his hand so tightly that it almost broke. He knew that since Xiaoju had appeared, she would definitely protect him. However, how could he let He Yan escape unscathed? Miss, he is this official's fiancé, he said. I was afraid that war would be unpredictable in Liangzhou. I could not bear to part with her, so I brought her with me. However, I did not expect Miss He to be so smart and brave. As a woman, she was able to achieve as much as a man. Huaijin did not dare to deceive your Majesty. He had already secretly reported the truth to your majesty a long time ago. Emperor Wen Xian laughed loudly, as if he was amused by Xiao Ju's behavior. He shook his head and sighed. I always thought that beloved official Xiao would never marry in this lifetime. I did not expect to see the day when the iron tree blossoms. In my opinion, there are not many men in this world who are as deeply in love as beloved official Xiao. He had already secretly reported to Emperor Wen Xian. Yan was stunned. When did this happen? How could she not know? Even though she was in the palace, she could not help but look at Xiao Ju. However, the latter's expression was calm and did not reveal any clues. At this moment, a woman's sharp voice cut in. Liar. Wuxia sat on the female side of the banquet. She looked at He Yan with a gaze that was like a thorn, almost piercing through He Yan's entire body. Her voice was not as gentle and sweet as before. It was like a pot of boiling water, sharp and hoarse. When did military governor Xiao have such a fiancé? Why did we not know? Everyone in the Shuo capital knew about Wuxia. However, when they thought about it, it made sense. When did Xiao Ju have such a fiancé? Why was there no news at all? Xiao Ju coldly stared at her. Wuxia could not help but shiver. She is indeed not my fiancé. Yan was stunned. In the next moment, the young man's cold and slightly deep voice sounded. It carried an unquestionable certainty. She is the scene in my eyes, the things in my heart, and the person in my heart. Chapter 201. Everyone in Dawei knew that the commander-in-chief of the Right Army, Xiao Ju, was well-mannered and well-versed in both the pen and the sword. When he picked up a sword, he could ensure the safety of an entire area. When he put down his sword, he was still an elegant young master. The heavens favored him by giving him good looks and good martial arts skills. Unfortunately, he was too cold and ruthless. As for who he would fall in love with, it was just a dream. Not to mention his temperament, he had already grown up to be so powerful. In this world, what kind of woman would he fall in love with? After all, the high and mighty fairy Wuxia had followed him for so many years, but she had never gained anything from him. Now he heard the words sweetheart from this person's mouth. Yan was in a daze. The officials were also in a daze. Even the emperor on the high seat was stunned. It turned out that the famous second young master Xiao could be so gentle when he thought of his sweetheart. It was as if the moonlight had faded away from its coldness and thinness, leaving behind only its clarity and brightness. The autumn moon was like a mirror, reflecting one's thoughts. Happiness or shyness, secrets or sadness, could not be hidden from the eyes of others. No one could remain unmoved when he looked at them with such eyes. Yan could hear his own heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. In the noisy banquet, it was clear and powerful. He was powerless to resist. The emperor's laughter broke the momentary daze. Ha ha, good. It's rare for Zhen to see beloved official Xiao like this. The empress has accomplished a good deed today. Zhen will also accomplish a good deed today. Since the two of you are in love with each other, beloved official Xiao, Zhen can't think of anything to reward you for this great victory in Jiang. Why don't Zhen bestow you a marriage? This miss he will be your wife. Are you willing? Xiao Ju received the decree. This humble subject thanks your majesty for your grace. He Yan had no choice but to kneel down to receive the decree. Wuxia's lips turned pale, and she almost fainted. The emperor's words were like gold and jade. Since he had already bestowed the marriage, he would not change it. Lin Shuanghe's heart twisted and turned with the changes in the hall. He was almost scared to death. Now that he was here, he could finally let out a sigh of relief. Even though he was full of doubts, now was not the time to talk. He simply ignored everything and wholeheartedly felt happy for his good friend. He excitedly said to his colleagues, "Did you hear that? The marriage was sanctioned. His Majesty has granted a marriage. This is a good marriage. Look at them, they are so well matched." Yan he had not recovered from the blow that Muan Lang, who spoke ill of He Rufei together with him, was a woman. He actually heard such a big news. For a moment he was stunned and wondered if he was dreaming. Congratulations, Military Governor Xiao. Congratulations, Military Governor Xiao. His Majesty's bestowment of marriage is a beautiful story. What was surprising was that Su Jingfu also spoke up for Xiao Ju. Not only did he not look surprised, he seemed to be happy to see it happen. He kept praising how wonderful this marriage was. Yan thought for a moment and understood. Su Jingfu and Xiao Ju were rivals. With Xiao Ju's status, marrying a woman like her who had nothing and no background was naturally the best. If it was a young lady from a high-ranking official's family, it would only bring harm and no benefit to Su Jingfu. Chu Zhao sat in the middle of the banquet hall with a smile on his face. He looked no different from usual. However, if one looked carefully, one could see that his hands on his knees were so tightly gripped that his knuckles were white. He was almost crumpling his robes. The courtiers watched a good show. Some joked and some congratulated him. The fifth prince was a little puzzled and asked Guangxua, "Fourth brother, why did His Majesty bestow a woman dressed as a man to General Fengyan as his wife? She doesn't look as pretty as Shen Jiejie." The fifth prince liked Xiao Ju very much. Most likely, Xiao Ju's experience was like a legend in the hearts of young boys. Youths yearned for heroes and admired the strong. The fifth prince Guangji heard from his birth mother, noble lady An, that Shen Jiejie of the censor Fu was the most compatible person with military governor Xiao. Guangji also thought that Shen Wuxia was born like a fairy. Now the person who was bestowed as Xiao Ju's wife was an unfamiliar woman dressed as a man. For Guangji, this was unacceptable. "Don't talk nonsense." Guangxua patted his head and looked at He Yan's back in the hall. Since General Fengyan is so protective, this Miss He must have something extraordinary about her. Moreover, she was able to enter the battlefield as a woman and become an official. Since the founding of Dawei, this is the first time someone has done so. What extraordinary about her? The crown prince said disdainfully. His tone was a little obscene. Who knows what kind of tricks she used? Xiao Huijin is really lucky. A Shen Wuxia, and now a female soldier. I don't know what kind of shady business they are doing in the tent every day. Guangxua frowned slightly. Your Highness, be careful with your words. The crown prince disagreed. Emperor Wenshuan looked at He Yan again. He Yan, although you are a woman, I know that you have your difficulties in joining the army as a woman. I am not an unreasonable person. Although you have committed the crime of deceiving me, I will not pursue the matter on account of your meritorious service in the Battle of Jiangrundu. Meritorious service is meritorious service, and mistakes are mistakes. I will punish you with a year's salary, but you will still be bestowed the title of Marquis. So good. Lin Shuanghe was quick-witted. He slammed the table and shouted first, Your Majesty is benevolent. Long live your Majesty. He Yan also kowtowed and shouted, Long live your Majesty. In an instant, a large number of courtiers knelt down and shouted, Long live your Majesty. Emperor Wenshuan became a wise ruler, and thought that he had accomplished a good deed. He was a little smug after being praised and sat on the high seat with a smile. Empress Zhang frowned without batting an eyelid. Noble Lady Ni's probing gaze swept over He Yan. Only concubine Lan sat quietly at the banquet table with a smile, as if everything that happened today had nothing to do with her. He Yan and Xiao Ju returned to their seats. Because she was now a womenfolk, she could only go to the womenfolk's banquet. She did not know any of the womenfolk here. Only Xia Qingxiu waved at her and whispered, Miss He, come over here. He Yan sat down next to Xia Qingxiu. Xia Qingxiu smiled and said, Congratulations, Miss He. She smiled and returned the greeting. The too in her heart was finally relieved. At least she could openly appear in Dawei's court under the name He Yan. She had succeeded in her first step. Although she did not know why Xiao Ju was involved and caused such a result, at least for now, there were no negative consequences. Of course, except for the two of them. He Yan's gaze swept across the banquet table. The seats of the womenfolk and womenfolk were facing each other. Her gaze accurately captured Su Zhiheng, who was sitting in the corner and secretly peeping at her. Su Zhiheng was very uneasy. This uneasiness reached its peak when He Yan's identity was revealed. He did not know what was going on. How could a dead person, a person who had been buried, whose corpse might have rotted into mud, appear in front of him again? This woman, who was also called He Yan, did not resemble his deceased wife at all. However, her every movement and expression overlapped with the He Yan in his memory. Especially when he peeped at her. She would also look at him across the crowd. Her meaningful gaze made his heart palpitate. Who exactly was she? Su Zhiheng did not believe in ghosts and gods. Every year, he would pray for blessings and burn incense in the temple. He was the most impatient. When he was young, his teacher always said that one should fear ghosts and gods. However, he always thought that if ghosts and gods really existed in the world, there would not be so many things that could not be done. When they were alive, they could not fight. How could they become fierce after they died? But Hien was not killed by him. Su Zhiheng's heart felt cold. Hien was going to die. This was the ending that the He family had prepared for her. The one who gave the order was He Yuansheng, and the one who did it was He Rufei. He Wanru was an accomplice, and he just did not say anything. Even if the evil ghost came back for revenge, shouldn't the He family be the first to take revenge? Why would they look for him? He gathered his courage and looked at He Yen again. However, he saw that the woman had already turned her head and was talking to Xia Qingxiu. It was as if the gaze just now was just an illusion. Su Zhiheng looked at He Rufei again. They were grasshoppers on the same rope. If He Yen really turned into a ghost and came back, she would definitely not let He Rufei go. As if sensing Su Zhiheng's gaze, He Rufei looked over. He frowned and slightly shook his head at him, indicating that he should not be too obvious. In the imperial court, the two of them always interacted with each other indifferently to avoid being discovered by others. Su Zhiheng was burning with anxiety. However, the banquet was not over yet, so he could not leave without permission. He could only lower his head and continue this long and nauseating celebration banquet, as if he was sitting on pins and needles. Emperor Wenshuan was very happy and drank a lot today. He had been on the throne for many years and did not have much talent in politics. In the first few years, it was okay. He worked hard day and night. Later, he felt that he really did not have any ability and simply became lazy. Although he was not outstanding, he was not an incapable ruler. With the court officials looking after him, nothing major would happen. Until Su Jingfu's power became greater and greater. Many officials secretly reported to him to be wary of Prime Minister Su. Emperor Wenshuan did not know that this was inappropriate. However, he had relied on Su Jingfu for many years. If Su Jingfu was not around, he would not be able to find someone to replace Su Jingfu. Moreover, Su Jingfu's status was not low. If something happened to such an important official, the imperial court would definitely be in turmoil. Although he did not have any talent in politics, he had seen the same thing happen when the previous emperor was alive. However, as long as one was human, they would have their own selfish motives. He turned a blind eye to Su Jingfu's actions. Su Jingfu covered the sky with one hand and affected the interests of many people. Gradually, Emperor Wenshuan knew that behind his back, there were people who called him an incapable ruler. However, they did not know that when the water was too clear, there would be no fish. Governing a country was different. Even as the emperor, there were times when he could not control himself. Xiao Zhongwu's defeat, Yudo's restlessness, the crown prince's tyrannical and immoral behavior. All kinds of messy matters came one after another, giving him a headache. However, tonight he did something that everyone praised as right. It was not easy. Emperor Wenshuan was happy from the bottom of his heart. Tonight at a banquet, the two most promising people in the Shuo capital were both bestowed with marriage. Originally, Chu Zhao and Su Pingting's marriage was the Chu family's way out of their league. However, now that Xiao Huijin's marriage was announced, Chu Zhao's marriage was not so surprising anymore. Everyone whispered to each other. Where did He Yen come from? Xiao Zhongwu's eldest son, Xiao Rubi, did not care about the opinions of outsiders and married a concubine's daughter. His youngest son, Xiao Huijin, was even more extreme. No one had even heard of his name. Could it be that his family did not even have an official position? On the other hand, Xiao Ju was very calm from the beginning to the end. Lin Shuanghe sat beside him. He wanted to immediately pull Xiao Ju to the side and ask him what was going on. However, under everyone's gaze, it was not good to ask, so he could only suppress his curiosity. Looking at Yan he was the same. He was so sullen that he wanted to flip the table. Everyone had their own thoughts during this celebratory banquet. When it ended, the main characters at the banquet all let out a sigh of relief. Yan stood up. Xia Qingxiu was still a bit worried. Miss He, do you need me to accompany you? She was now being stared at by countless pairs of eyes. Everyone looked at her with calculating gazes. Most ordinary women would not be able to handle it. It's okay. He Yan smiled and thanked her for her kindness. I'll go out by myself. Xia Qingxiu did not insist. Just as he was about to leave, he thought of something and turned to look at Shen Muxue. He saw that Shen Muxue's face was pale and his lips were pale. He was like a stiff puppet, without any signs of life. She paused. In the end, she did not say anything and got up to look for Yan He. The emperor and the other concubines had already left. Yan He pulled Xia Qingxiu and rushed over aggressively. When he saw Lin Shuanghe but did not see Xiao Ju, he was furious. Where's Xiao Huijin? And that Muan Lang? They lied to me so bitterly. I must get an explanation. Xia Qingxiu pulled him back and seemed to be speechless. He reminded him, Marquis Wuan is a woman. You should watch your words. Have you seen a woman who can chop off several heads with a knife? Yan He shouted. I don't care if they're women or not. Are the two of them playing with me? I'm about to become an idiot. Xia Qingxiu. Be careful. Father is here. What if he hears you? Xia Qingxiu's father, Lord Xia, was looking in their direction. Yan He was shocked. He coughed softly and lowered his voice. His face was still angry. He clenched his fist and asked, Where are the two of them? Lin Shuanghe spread his hands. They left. Left. Yan He widened his eyes in disbelief. When? After the emperor left, the two of them left. Lin Shuanghe waved his fan. They just got married and will be husband and wife in the future. Why are you, an outsider, interfering? Lin Shuanghe glanced at Xia Qingxiu and said with a smile, Could it be that you still haven't given up and want to move Mimi He into your tent? He Yan's identity had been exposed anyway, so he might as well openly call her Mimi He. Yan He was so angry that his face turned green. Don't talk nonsense. He looked at Xia Qingxiu, who was smiling but not speaking, and emphasized in a low voice, I'm not familiar with Muan Lang at all. Then you should go back early. Lin Shuanghe patted his shoulder. On the day of their wedding, I'll definitely invite you to the wedding banquet. Don't worry, don't worry. After he finished speaking, he walked away while humming an off-key tune. In a courtyard somewhere in the palace, weeds were overgrown. It was already autumn, so the flowers and leaves had withered. There was no sign of human habitation here, making it seem even more desolate and lonely. A bright moon shone on the eaves, causing the courtyard to be filled with white frost. The person in front stopped, and the girl behind him stood still. Puzzled, she asked, Where is this place? It's an abandoned side palace, Xiao Ju said. There are people guarding it, so no one can come in. The palace was huge, and it was He Yan's first time entering the palace, but Xiao Ju wasn't. It was normal for him to know about the secret passages. Seeing that there was no one around, He Yan was slightly relieved. He looked at him and asked, Commander-in-Chief, what's going on? Why did the emperor say today that you had already told him my identity? Xiao Ju said calmly, Didn't you give Zhao Shiming a letter? He Yan was shocked. How did you know? He didn't answer, but He Yan understood. Xiao Ju had many capable people under his command. Not to mention entering the palace, he probably would have fallen into Xiao Ju's hands before he even entered the palace. Why did you write a letter behind my back? Xiao Ju asked. He Yan smiled bitterly. I always felt that my identity couldn't be hidden for long. Rather than someone revealing it at some point, it's better to prepare myself in advance. Moreover, once the crime of deceiving the emperor is announced, won't you also be implicated? Before she left the Rundu, she had asked the county magistrate of the Rundu to deliver a letter to the emperor. After the battle in the Rundu, the city officials would record the ins and outs of what had happened in a memorial and present it to the emperor. The letter in the memorial would expose He Yan's identity. However, at the same time that she revealed her identity as a woman, the people of the Rundu signed the letter. He Yan had never met Emperor Wen Xian, but he had always heard from Lin Shuanghe that Emperor Wen Xian was a mediocre and soft-hearted emperor. Sometimes, as long as Su Jingfu didn't fan the flames, he actually had the rare sympathy and compassion of an imperial family. When the late emperor was still alive, a minister made a mistake and the people petitioned. The late emperor was grateful for his past merits and pardoned the minister's death sentence. Emperor Wenxian worshipped his father the most in his life. He would deliberately imitate the late emperor in many things. Therefore, when Zhao Shiji's petition was presented, Emperor Wenxian hesitated. What's more, He Yan's contributions were beyond doubt. In the Battle of the Liangzhou Guards, the Battle of Jiang, and the Battle of the Rundu, her merits in each battle were worthy of praise. In comparison, dressing up as a man wasn't a big responsibility. Moreover, she didn't choose to disguise herself as a man. She had no other choice but to join the army by accident. Her merits outweighed her faults. She was a young genius and a woman. The petition from the people would be the last straw that broke the emperor's back. If she wanted to win the hearts of the people, Emperor Wenxian couldn't order her to be executed. Otherwise, what would the new Liangzhou guards think? What would the people of Jiang think? What would the rescued women in the Rundu think? He Yan thought that he had considered everything and tried his best to convince Zhao Shiji. However, he didn't expect Xiao Ju to interfere at this moment. I stopped the letter, he said. He Yan stared at him. Your plan was good, but it wasn't perfect. You might be able to escape unscathed, but you might also lose your life. As long as there was a slight possibility, he wouldn't let He Yan take the risk. But didn't you also expose my identity? He Yan didn't understand. How did you convince His Majesty? She didn't know that the memorial that Xiao Ju had presented on her behalf had tied the two of them together from the beginning. There was no Fancheng or no other choice. Everything was because Xiao Ju had brought He Yan into the army camp for her own selfish desires. If the crime of deceiving the emperor was to be considered, then both of them would be punished. However, with Yudo eyeing them like a tiger watching its prey, Emperor Wenxian couldn't bear the consequences of not having Xiao Ju guarding De Wei's territory. Therefore, Emperor Wenxian wouldn't punish them. Even if he did, Xiao Ju would bear the responsibility. Of course, he made this matter a little more soul-stirring. The memorial was as moving as a love story passed down by word of mouth. It easily moved Emperor Wenxian's romantic and talented heart. After that, he secretly leaked the news to Su Jingfu. When it came to Xiao Ju's marriage, other than the Xiao couple, Su Jingfu was most worried about it. Everyone in Shuajing knew that Shen Muxia was the most likely person to marry Xiao Ju. If the Shen family and Xiao family were to become in-laws, imperial censorship's people would all stand on Xiao Ju's side. This made Su Jingfu very distressed. Even if it wasn't Shen Muxia, Su Jingfu wouldn't be happy if she was the daughter of a court official in Shuajing, as long as it could increase Xiao Ju's power. At this time, He Yan suddenly appeared. Su Jingfu sent people to investigate, and found out that she was just the daughter of a military officer at the city gates. He simply thought that this was a good thing that fell from the sky. Therefore, not only did he not stop it, he even tried his best to facilitate the marriage between Xiao Ju and He Yan. For Xiao Ju to marry He Yan, a woman who wouldn't be of any help to his career, Su Jingfu was happy to see it happen. Therefore, there was the scene at the celebration banquet today. Xiao Ju only picked out a few important points. After listening, He Yan was silent for a long time. She never thought that things would turn out this way. Her purpose for writing that letter, other than to get herself out of the possible death sentence, was to not implicate Xiao Ju and draw a clear distance from him. However, she didn't think that she would be involved in a marriage. Although at some point, when he said the word sweetheart, she was indeed moved and wished that time would stop. However, she had to wake up from the dream. There were things that she had to do. She couldn't let Xiao Ju be soft-hearted and let him sacrifice his precious life just to protect her. His life should be like the bright moon in the sky, clean, bright, and never mix with the dark and rotten mud of the ditch. As long as it shone on her, she didn't expect anything more. Governor, He Yan took a deep breath and looked up at him. Actually, you don't have to help me by asking His Majesty to grant you a marriage. It's too unfair for you to try your best to maintain a fake marriage. It's not fake. Xiao Ju interrupted her. He Yan was stunned. What did you say? What was said in the palace is not fake. The young man's voice was gentle. His eyelashes drooped down, and there were faint ripples in his dark eyes. He was unbelievably gentle. In the cold autumn night, the courtyard was deep and the Milky Way was quiet. The slanting moon climbed up the curtain. The night was not as beautiful as a certain someone's eyes. He asked, "Do you like the moon?" Hien answered blankly, "I like it." The next moment, something warm and cold was stuffed into her hand. Hien looked down. It was the black jade that was rumored to be the heirloom of the Xiao family, which she had snatched away when she was drunk. It was lying in her palm with a lifelike python. "Now the moon is yours." Chapter 202. Hien was still in a daze when they boarded the carriage to leave the palace. Fei Nu was an honest person. She silently drove the carriage while the young man sat beside her. The jade pendant in her hand was originally cold to the touch. Now that she held it tightly, it seemed to be burning hot. Xiaoju's gaze fell on her hand. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "Do you want to crush it?" Hien's strength was trained by throwing stone weights in the martial arts field. Crushing a walnut with her bare hands was not a problem. It was not impossible for her to crush this piece of jade. She was startled and unconsciously spread her hands. She did not know what to do. This was a dual-colored jade bestowed by the Empress Dowager. One was given to Xiao Jing, and the other to Xiaoju. It was rumored that it was the family heirloom of the Xiao family. Lin Shuanghe said that this jade pendant never left Xiaoju's side. She had once stolen it when she was drunk in the Liangzhou guards. Knowing that it was a rare item, she returned it to Xiaoju. She did not expect that after so many twists and turns, it would still end up in her hands. Hien had never received such a valuable gift. She hesitated and said, "Governor, this is not appropriate for me, is it?" Xiaoju took the snake-patterned black jade from her hand. He lowered his head and removed the tassel from Hien's waist, and replaced it with this piece of black jade. His movements were gentle and his expression was careful. His tone was clear and light. "Big brother gave his piece to sister-in-law. Since you and I are engaged, I should give it to you." Engagement? Hien's face turned red again. The words that Xiaoju had said to her in that abandoned side palace just now, she simply couldn't think about it. If she thought about it, she would feel like she had secretly seen fireworks for the first time after the New Year's Eve dinner. Boom. The fireworks flew into the sky and turned into countless dazzling stars in the sky. Even when she lay on the bed at night, she could not fall asleep. She would always remember the beauty of that moment. Hien tried to stop herself from thinking about it. She asked, "Are we going back to Xiao Manor now?" Hearing the word back, Xiaoju curled his lips and said, "To your home." "My home? You're a woman." Xiaoju lowered her eyes. "No one knew that you lived in the Xiao mansion before, but after today, someone will definitely investigate the He family. If you live in my residence, there will be gossip." He didn't care about what other people thought, but Hien couldn't, and neither could he Sui and Hiensheng. Nowadays, men and women were not as clear-cut as in the previous dynasty. But if word got out that she was living in another man's residence before she was married, it would not be good for Hien. Right. Hien nodded. When she thought about returning to the He family, she felt another headache. Hiensheng had repeatedly urged her to immediately resign. Now, not only did she not resign, she was also promoted to nobility. Fortunately, he didn't have to worry about the woman's identity being exposed. But for He Sui and Hiensheng, it should be a big shock. "Don't worry." Xiaoju seemed to have seen through her worries and reminded her. During the celebration banquet, there were already people who went to congratulate the He family in advance. "Your father and younger brother should already know." Hien felt relieved. He Sui and Hiensheng indeed already knew. Not long ago, Hiensheng was still reading in his room. He Sui came back from her employer's home and took some water to take a bath. Qingmei had just finished washing their clothes when she heard someone knocking on the door. Their street was filled with people who did small business, and they weren't rich. It was already so late, and all the houses were closed. Qingmei was a girl after all. He Sui took an oil lamp and went to open the door. Hiensheng was worried that something might happen, so he also closed the door and put on an outer robe to follow his father, who knew that when the door opened, there would be a long line of people outside. They were all dressed as palace servants. Hiensheng's heart skipped a beat. He only thought, could it be that something happened to Hien? Her official position of Muanlang came easily, but it wasn't a long-term plan. Once the matter was exposed, she was afraid that she would suffer a disaster. He Sui was also confused. He Yunqing didn't tell his father that He Yan had been promoted because he was afraid that he would worry. He Sui only thought that it could be that the Fan family came to cause trouble again. He immediately asked, "Officials, this is..." "Congratulations to old Master He. Congratulations to old Master He." The head servant's face was full of joy as he ordered people to carry the box behind him into the courtyard. "Old Master He raised a good daughter. Lady He is a woman who doesn't lose out to men." Previously, in the Battle of Jiang and the Battle of Rundu to defend the city, His Majesty conferred Lady He the title of Marquis Wuan and bestowed a marriage. "I think that General Fengyan will soon come to visit, so I congratulate you in advance." He Yunqing sucked in a breath of cold air. This street wasn't very wide. Once night fell, people could clearly hear who was beating their children or quarreling with each other. These eunuchs' formation was too big, so the neighbors had already heard the commotion. Some hid behind their doors and peeked out through the cracks of their doors, while others simply opened their doors to watch the commotion. They didn't mind the commotion. At this moment, the eunuchs rattled on. Everyone didn't quite understand, but they were clear about one thing. The eldest daughter of the He family didn't die. Not only did she not die, but she also didn't confer an official position and was bestowed a marriage. He Sui only knew that He Yan had returned to the capital. Because of his inconvenient identity, he temporarily stayed at a friend's house. He Sui thought that He Yan had become a deserter, so he didn't dare to say anything. Now, all of these matters were so confusing that he didn't know where to start asking. However, He Yunqing was quick-witted. When he heard the eunuchs say daughter, he knew that He Yan's identity as a woman couldn't be hidden anymore. However, these people also said that His Majesty had rewarded him. Did they not intend to pursue He Yan's crime of deceiving the emperor? This was rather surprising, but He Yunqing didn't have time to be happy about this at this moment. He only asked, "Official? You said that my sister was bestowed a marriage? May I ask which family she was bestowed a marriage with?" He Sui also came back to his senses at this time. Muan Lang and Marquis Wuan weren't the most important things. How could his daughter be betrothed as soon as she returned home? He, as her father, hadn't said anything yet. How could she casually find someone she didn't know about and marry him? He had heard of meat pies falling from the sky, but he had never heard of a son-in-law falling from the sky. "Master He, don't worry. I said that General Fengyan will be here soon." The eunuchs crossed his arms and smiled. "You mean," He Yunqing said in disbelief, "General Fengyan?" "That's right." At this moment, the sound of a carriage galloping could be heard not far away. Everyone looked towards the end of the street and saw a gorgeous carriage coming through the night. The person driving the horse was a tall imperial bodyguard. At first glance, he was different from ordinary imperial bodyguards. Just by looking at his face, he was more handsome. The eunuchs smiled and said, "Aren't they here now?" The carriage stopped in front of the He family's house. At this time, the neighbors all got the news. In the middle of the night, they put on their clothes and climbed out of their beds to see the noble. They saw a man and a woman coming down from the carriage. The woman was He Yan. She grew up on this street. All the neighbors watched He Yan grow up. Today, she was wearing men's clothing. Her hair was casually scattered and her face was washed clean. She looked clean and beautiful. She had a heroic spirit that wasn't seen before. There were young men in the prime of their lives who were a little dazed. They thought that the eldest daughter of the He family was beautiful, but she wasn't beautiful to this extent. Now she was a little dazzling. And the young man who helped her out of the carriage and stood beside her made the young ladies and young women on this street blush. This young man was also wearing an official's uniform. With a handsome appearance, it was obvious that he was a noble from the palace. In this shabby corner of their place, he was simply like a shining gem. When the eunuchs saw Xiaoju, they hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. "Military Governor Xiao, Marquis Wuan greets you." It was unknown which stupid neighbor shouted, "Military Governor Xiao, this is old He's son-in-law, Military Governor Xiao." "Military Governor Xiao? Is he really that General Fengyan? Where? I also want to see. He Yan." Xiaoju had become a rare animal here. Everyone wanted to see her. The eunuchs also smiled. "Military Governor, I have already brought your message. I will return to the palace now." Then he looked at He Sui, who was still in great shock and hadn't recovered yet. He felt a little disdainful in his heart. Why did he choose such a family? Look at this father-in-law. He was just a boorish martial artist. He didn't even know to invite the people who were on duty to come in for a cup of tea. He was really a country bumpkin. The next moment, Fei Nu consciously stepped forward and said that he had worked hard. He gave a piece of silver to each of the eunuchs present today. The head eunuchs weighed the extraordinarily heavy cloth bag in his hand and felt satisfied. Forget it. Although the country bumpkin was insensible, his son-in-law was generous and took good care of people. When he returned to the palace, he should say a few good words about him in front of the emperor. He Sui finally recovered and welcomed Xiao Ju and the others into the house. He Yunqing pushed out the neighbors who wanted to enter their house to continue watching Xiao Ju. It's too late today. Another day, another day. Aunties, uncles and aunts, come another day. Go back and rest. After saying that, he closed the door with force. With his back against the door, he breathed a sigh of relief and ran into the hall. All the lamps in the room were lit, but other than the lamp that he Yunqing used to read at night, which had more oil, there were only 3 oil lamps in the other rooms, and one of them had run out of oil. Qingmei rummaged for a long time before she found some broken tea leaves. She quickly made some tea and handed it to Xiaoju. He Sui still felt that he was dreaming. He looked at Yin Yan. He was speechless. Yunqing, didn't you tell father? Yin asked curiously. Yunqing said impatiently. If I told father, how could he stay at home peacefully for so many days? He would have come looking for you a long time ago. TSK, she did not tell him. Yin was in a dilemma. How should she tell him? She knew that He Sui would not be able to accept what she did at Jiangrendu. That was why she threw this hot potato to He Yunqing. Now that He Yunqing didn't lay the groundwork for her, she didn't dare to say anything else. Xiao Ju glanced at him. Let me say it. The 2 men from the He family were shocked. Now that He Yan had given them a sum of money, the He family's house was not leaky. It looked like a proper house, but it could not escape the word simple. He Yan was one thing after all, he had always grown up in this room. But Xiao Ju sitting in this room was really out of place. He Sui felt that his own rattan chair, which was so rough that even the barbs had not been polished clean, had tarnished this young master's exquisite robes. Fortunately, this young master did not have any opinions about their shabby house. He also did not dislike the weak tea made from the dregs of the tea leaves. He did not have any patience on his face. He calmly told him how He Yin joined the army in Liangzhou, and how he became Marquis Wen and Muan Lang. He Sui was shocked and frightened. There were a few times when he picked up the teacup and gulped down the tea to calm himself down. He Yin thought that there was no need for him to go into such detail. After Xiao Ju finished explaining, He Yunqing and He Sui finally understood. So He Yin, who had hit the jackpot, had now become the first female marquis since the founding of the Great Wei Empire? But He Sui still felt that something was wrong. However, today's shocking news came one after another. He could not accept it properly and could not think of anything for a while. He could only look at He Yin and then at Xiao Ju. Which family's daughter could be like his daughter? She went out, killed people, gained merit, became an official, and even brought back a man. Originally, when He Yin was infatuated with Fan Cheng, He Sui looked down on Fan Cheng. He thought that Fan Cheng was a young master who only knew how to squander money because of his family background. At first glance, he could tell that he was not someone who lived a peaceful life. His daughter had been pampered by him since she was young. If she married into Fan family, she would suffer a lot. Although Fan Cheng did not take He Yin as his official wife. Later, He Yin almost lost her life for Fan Cheng. After she woke up, she gradually forgot about Fan Cheng. He Sui was very happy. He only thought that after a few days, he would ask a matchmaker to help him find a suitable young man in Yanjing. Later, He Yin left Shuajing and joined the army. He Sui was already prepared that He Yin would not marry, or like him, take in a son-in-law. He did not expect that this time. He Yin did not even give him any leeway and directly let the current emperor bestow a marriage. That was the emperor. Fortunately, it was not some ugly melon and split dates. He Sui secretly looked at Xiaoju. He had only seen her from afar before, but this was the first time he was looking at her up close. Not to mention other things, he did not know how this child's parents gave birth to her. How could they give birth to such a perfect child? He thought and glanced at He Yinsheng. Suddenly he looked away in disappointment. Sigh, comparisons are odious. He Yinsheng was baffled. He Yin saw that He Sui was staring at Xiao Ju. She was afraid that her father would ask something difficult to answer, so she quickly said, "It's too late today. If you have anything to say, we can talk about it another day." She then turned to Xiao Ju and said, "Eldest young Master Xiao and eldest young Mistress Xiao should have already returned home. They have a lot of questions to ask you. Go back and explain. It's almost dawn." She gave Xiao Ju a look. "Let's go." He Sui still wanted to ask, Yen, father still has questions. If you have questions, I'll answer them." He Yin was anxious. He pulled Xiao Ju up from the chair and pulled him out. Xiao Ju did not struggle. He turned his head and said to He Sui, "Uncle, I'll visit you another day." He Sui was shocked by the uncle. Before he could react, Xiao Ju had already been dragged away by He Yin. "What did he call me just now?" The old father stood in the room and asked his inferior son. He Yinsheng disdainfully said, "It's not father." Previously, when Xiao Ju gave him a horse at the racecourse, He Sui scolded him for being a good-for-nothing. Why didn't he take a look at himself? The word uncle made him feel dizzy. He was indeed his biological son. Xiao Ju was dragged out of the house by He Yin. The neighbors who had come to watch the show had already dispersed. After all, it was a late autumn night. Even if they were curious and wanted to see the legendary General Feng Yin, they could not squat in the corner in the cold wind for the entire night. There was no one on the street. Xiao Ju let her drag him along without struggling. After they were out of the house, He Yin looked around with a guilty conscience. He only let go when he was sure it was safe. Xiao Ju looked at her calmly and reminded her, "Your actions make it seem like I'm ashamed." He Yin came back to her senses and laughed. "The people on the street like to watch a show. Governor, I'm sure you don't like to be stared at." Xiao Ju, "I don't hate it." He Yin thought, "Who would believe that? This person is usually alone. Now she's saying she doesn't hate it?" A man's mouth was full of lies. She looked back at the door again. He Yinsheng and He Sui did not chase after them. Qing Mei was obedient and did not make any movements. He Yin sighed in relief. He Yin felt strange bringing Xiao Ju back. It was mainly because Emperor Wen Xian's imperial edict was too sudden. He Yin was not prepared for it. She pushed Xiao Ju out. She knew that it was time to say goodbye to Xiao Ju, but she did not know what to say. When they were in the Liangzhou Guards and in Jiang, they got along very well. Why was it that when they were in Shuo capital, she could not say a single word? She had been in the military for a few years and had a glib tongue. However, at this moment, she could only squeeze out 2 words. "Have a safe trip." Xiao Ju could not help but laugh. He Yin asked, "What are you laughing at?" He bent down slightly so that his eyes were level with He Yan's. He curled his lips and teased her seriously. "Lady, he's not as good at lying anymore." "Damn it," He Yin said vaguely. "I've never lied to you." Xiao Ju stood up straight and rubbed her head. "It's windy here. You should go back." He Yin nodded and looked up at him. She did not know why, but she felt a little reluctant. Ever since she joined the military, she had spent a lot of time with Xiao Ju. Now that she was back in Shuo capital and had regained her identity as a woman, it was impossible for her to spend time with Xiao Ju, let alone spend the night with him. Xiao Ju seemed to know what she was thinking and said, "Don't worry. I'll come and see you." He Yin blushed again and replied instinctively, "Yes, I'll come and see you too." As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized what she had said. She wanted to knock herself out so that she could muddle through this awkward conversation. He Yin knew that she would make a fool of herself if she stayed any longer. She turned around and said, "Then I'll go now. See you another day, Commander-in-Chief." She went into the house and closed the door. Xiao Ju stood at the door and looked at the closed door. After a while, he walked towards the carriage that was parked at the corner. Fei Nu skillfully pulled the reins and the carriage left the alley. The interrogation in the house was not over yet. Qing Mei did not dare to speak when there were outsiders. Now that there was no one else in the house, Qing Mei hugged her and cried, "Lady, it's great that you're still alive. This servant thought that she would never see you again. Sob, sob, sob. How did you lose so much weight? Did you suffer outside? You must have. This girl had also grown up a lot. She was slender and elegant like a blooming flower, but her crybaby character was still the same as before. Ian did not know whether to laugh or cry. It took him a lot of effort to comfort her. Before Sui could speak, Ian said, "Father, I've been tired all day and I'm very sleepy. Can I wash up and sleep first? I'll explain to you tomorrow." Sui loved this daughter of his the most. Ian would even pluck the stars from the sky for her. When she heard Ian say that he was tired, her heart ached. She had already forgotten all her doubts and said, Okay. Yen, go to sleep first. If there's anything else, we can talk about it tomorrow." Yen breathed a sigh of relief. She had to answer the questions one by one. He was afraid that he would not be able to sleep tonight. Besides, she had not thought about how to answer the questions. She still needed to use the night to think about it. With great difficulty, he managed to coax Qing Mei into smiling through her tears. Sui sent her away. After Yen did a simple wash in the courtyard, the moment he returned to his room, he saw the young master of the He family sitting on a chair, looking like he was about to launch a punitive expedition. Yen closed the door behind him. "Yunsheng, are you going to catch a mouse in my room?" Yunsheng's face was cold. "I'm not as easy to fool as father. Yen, tell me clearly. Why did you marry yourself off for no reason?" The tone of his words made him sound like an elder brother instead of a younger brother. "Don't talk nonsense. It was His Majesty who wanted me to marry him." Yen walked to the edge of the couch and sat down. Although the bed in the He family was hard, her mattress was made soft by Qing Mei. Yunsheng sneered. "You said earlier that you were living in a friend's house. Could it be that you were living in General Fingyun's residence?" Yen. The child had grown up, and was not easy to fool. Yunsheng was furious. "Yen. When I lived in his residence, I didn't know that I would be bestowed a marriage." Yen tried to appease the anxious young master. "Moreover, we didn't live in the same room. What does it matter? You are a woman." "Yunsheng, I joined the army before. Did you know that I joined the army? When I was in the Liang Province Guards, my brothers and I all lived in the same bed. There were more than a dozen people on the same bed. For me, it was too pretentious to say that men and women were different. It was impossible for me to do it." Yunsheng was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The sisters of other families all scrupulously followed etiquette. It was not that Yunsheng was pedantic. If it was someone else, it would be fine, but it just had to be a Xiaoju. That kind of family was so outstanding. To put it bluntly, people with eyes would think that the He family was trying to climb up the social ladder. Yan's thoughts were simple. What if Xiaoju or the Xiao family looked down on him because of this? This world had always been difficult for women. Gossip was a fearful thing. However, looking at Yen in front of him yawning indifferently, Yunsheng's heart softened again. Forget it. It was already very good that he could come back alive. According to Xiaoju, every war that Yen participated in was so dangerous. He had suffered so much, so why should he care about other things? However, the young man was still very concerned about another matter. He asked, "Since it was bestowed a marriage, does that General Fengyan like you or not?" Yen paused. In his mind, he recalled what Xiaoju had said in the palace. It was not fake. The words he said in the palace were not fake. That meant that the person of his dreams was real. She lowered her head and looked at the jade pendant on her waist. The giant python on the jade pendant was dangerous and docile. It was entrenched in the clouds like a magnificent dream. "The moon is yours." Even after such a long time, these words still sounded so moving. However, Yen suddenly widened his eyes. How did Xiaoju know that he was the moon? Chapter 203. Just as Yen was tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep, Xiaoju, who had just returned to the Xiao family, bumped into Xiao Jing and his wife, who had been waiting at the door for a long time. Bai Rongwei didn't even have time to change her clothes. She and Xiaoju were sitting in the main hall, waiting for Xiaoju to return. Xiao Jing immediately asked, "Huijin, what's going on?" "Gong. How could miss be a miss?" Xiao family was in a state of turmoil and chaos. It was already shocking enough that they found out during the banquet that the young master living in their house was a girl. The emperor even went as far as to grant a marriage. No matter how magnanimous their family was, they couldn't change the fact that Xiao Ju's good friend had turned into his wife. The only thing they were sure of was that Xiao Ju definitely liked Miss He. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said those things in front of all the civil and military officials. Now that they thought about it, everything, such as wanting He Yan to live in his courtyard, always seeming to protect him, were now explained. They had just explained the same thing to He Sui at the He family, and now they had to explain it to Xiao Jing. Fortunately, they were family, so Xiao Ju didn't go into too much detail. He just gave a rough summary so that the husband and wife could understand. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei barely understood, and they looked at each other. Bai Rongwei probed, "Huaijin, do you really like Miss He?" Xiao Ju calmly said, "If it's fake, then can the Xiao family go against the emperor's decree?" Bai Rongwei was speechless. Of course they couldn't. His lips curled. If it's fake, then there wouldn't be this marriage. Xiao Ju seemed to be indifferent to the affairs of the imperial court, but that did not mean that she did not have any connections. He was the one who pushed for this marriage to achieve his goal. If he didn't like He Yan, he didn't have to do this. Even if Emperor Wen Xian had the intention, he could have done something to ruin the marriage. But, Bai Rongwei grumbled, "You child, it's fine if you're happy, but how could you just bring the girl home? Although there's nothing going on between me and your big brother, if outsiders find out, it's hard to avoid gossiping and damaging Miss He's reputation." Previously, her identity was unknown, so it was not appropriate to bring her home. If we brought her home, no one would know. Xiao Ju said, "This will not happen again in the future." Only then did the couple heave a sigh of relief. In the past, he had always been worried that with Xiao Ju's personality, he would not want to get married in this lifetime. Now that he finally knew that he liked girls, it was a good thing. But he was afraid that the young man's nature would be greedy for a moment of pleasure, and it would be over if he caused trouble. Now that they saw that he knew what he was doing, the couple was slightly relieved. "Then where is Miss He from? Where does she live? Is there anyone else in her family?" Bai Rongwei asked him. When the young master of the Lin family left, he mentioned that Miss He's father was a military officer. "Since we are already in-laws, and her parents are no longer here, your big brother and I should pay a visit. We can't let people think that we don't understand etiquette." "That's right," Xiao Jing also said. "We should go and discuss the details of the marriage with Master He. We also need to prepare your betrothal gifts." This marriage decree came suddenly, so the family didn't prepare anything. These years, the emperor had bestowed many gifts, but Xiao Ju himself was too lazy to take care of it. Bai Rongwei had carefully stored it in the storeroom for him. Originally, he thought that it would be 3 to 5 years before he could use it, but he didn't expect the surprise to come so suddenly. From beginning to end, the couple didn't care about He Yan's family background. Even when they asked about He Yan's family, they just wanted to understand the situation. The elders above them had all passed away. The eldest brother was the father, and the eldest sister-in-law was the mother. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei weren't vain people. When Xiao Jing married Bai Rongwei, the rumors were rampant in the capital. The relatives of the Xiao family strongly opposed it, but in the end, Bai Rongwei, the Shu daughter, still became the eldest wife of the Xiao family. Therefore, for He Yan, they thought that as long as his family background was clean and his character wasn't bad, it was enough. What does Miss He like? With something to do, Bai Rongwei felt that the burden on her shoulders had become heavier. Xiao family members were simple, so it was easy to manage. She didn't usually have any disputes with Xiao Jing. Now that Xiao Ju's marriage was finally settled, she felt that she had to handle this matter beautifully. "How about I go buy some beautiful silk cloth tomorrow? Then I'll buy some jewelry, but it can't be too expensive or it'll be disrespectful. How old is Master He? Since he's a military officer, he's bound to have some difficulties. Let's buy some tonics." She spoke in detail. She was so engrossed in her discussion with Xiao Jing that she didn't even notice when Xiao Ju slipped away. When she finally reacted and was about to ask Xiao Ju for her opinion, she realized that the chair in front of her was already empty. Xiao Ju returned to her room, took off her court robe, put it on the chair, and sat down on the edge of the bed. The room was dimly lit, and there were faint sounds of bustling outside. It was probably by Rongwei instructing the servants to take out the key to open the storeroom. Everyone was shocked tonight, so they wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. But, at least it wasn't all for nothing. Emperor Wen Xian's marriage bestowment came at the right time. Not only did it remove Chu Zhao, that eyesore, from the equation, it also settled the matter between him and He Yan. The emperor's mind wasn't clear for all these years, but he finally did something right. Previously, he thought that He Yan admired Chu Zhao, so even though he had many things on his mind, he didn't want to mention it to He Yan. In this world, there were people who would do anything to take what they liked by force. For people like him, the one thing he hated the most was being forced. But he wasn't being forced. He lowered his eyes and took out a sachet. The sachet was turned inside out. The delicate embroidery on the outside was turned inside out, and the coarse cloth inside was turned outside. Inside the sachet, the crooked corners and the pockmarked embroidery of the moon sparkled under the dim light. It was a little ugly, but he even added some gold thread. The handsome young man lowered his head and couldn't help but laugh. In the small room outside, Qi Wu threw a punch. Fei Nu caught it firmly and turned it to the side. Calm down. Did you already know? Qi Wu was so angry that his nose was crooked. I was wondering why you always looked like you wanted to say something, but didn't when I didn't like him. Why is it that every time I'm worried about young master's marriage, I'm sweating profusely, but you're so calm and carefree? So it's not that you're careless, but that you already knew. You and I have worked together for young master. We've been brothers for so many years, but you hid it from me. Doesn't your conscience hurt? Fei Nu dodged his punch again. He was also speechless. When did I hide it from you? When we were in Jiang City, didn't you see how he looked like in women's clothing? How could you still think that he is a man? Qi Wu was stunned. That was true. He Yan had worn women's clothing before. When he was wearing skirts in Jiang City, Cui Yuezhi and his concubine, Princess Mu Hongjin of Jiang, the commoners and the peddlers on the street, no one doubted He Yan's identity as a woman. Her eyebrows were beautiful and her figure was slim. If she wasn't really a girl, how could no one find out? I thought it was because he looked like a girl, Qi Wu said in a daze. Besides, how could I believe that a girl would go to the Liangzhou guard and throw 20 stone dumbbells in a row? Even a strong man couldn't beat her. And she ate so much. He never doubted He Yan's identity as a woman. It wasn't because He Yan didn't dress well as a woman, but because she dressed as a man too well. Which young lady would be able to sit among a group of men and listen to their vulgar words without batting an eyelid? Sometimes he could even say a few words. Fei Nu patted his good friend's shoulder. Don't think too much. Weren't you always afraid that young master would be called gay by the people of Shuo capital? He is a woman. Now, what you're worried about won't happen. That's true. Qi Wu sat down sullenly. But now that I think about it, I feel like I'm very stupid. It's not that you're stupid, Fei Nu said from the bottom of his heart. It's because he does a lot of things better than men. Fei Nu asked himself honestly. If Xiao Ju didn't ask Luaning to find out about He Yan's background, and accidentally found out that He Yan was a woman, what would he do? Even if He Yan wore a dress and stood in front of him, he would probably have the same reaction as Fei Nu. He would think that this person was so outstanding in women's clothing. However, it was useless to think about this now that young master had gotten what he wanted. And this young madam was also a capable and brave person. If news of tonight's matter spread out, Shuo capital would probably set off a huge wave tomorrow. In reality, Fei Nu was right. Before tomorrow, the people who had interacted with He Yan in the past, when they found out that He Yan was a woman, and that he was going to marry Xiao Ju, they couldn't believe their ears. In the barracks, Hong Shan's group of people were lying on their bunks, scratching their feet and chatting. After returning to the capital, they were stationed at the foot of a mountain not far from the capital. Here they still practiced daily, but compared to Liangzhou, it was much better. At least there were fields at the foot of the mountain. When they weren't practicing, the soldiers in the barracks would help the farmers and get some fresh vegetables and fruits. Shuo capital also didn't have as much wind and sand as Liangzhou. Therefore, in less than a month after returning to the capital, everyone was already rounder. Those who lived in Shuo capital were able to leave the barracks one day a month to visit their families. Jiang Jiao had just gone to find the military instructor to arrange for a few days before returning home. As he was walking back to his room, he saw a small person rushing into his room. His movements were as fast as the wind. Jiang Jiao remembered this small person. His surname was Bao. Because he liked to inquire about trivial matters and was well informed, everyone called him Bao Inquire. After a long time, no one remembered his original name. They only remembered that he was called Bao Inquire. Looking at his posture, he must have gotten some big news. Jiang Jiao followed him unhurriedly. These days, they were in Shuo capital, and it was very boring. He Yan now had an official title, so if he wasn't here, he would miss him. Bao Inquire ran into Hong Shan's room. Everyone was chatting. He jumped onto the table in the middle of the room and was scolded by everyone. "Your feet are covered in mud. Hurry up and get down. That's where I eat." Bao Inquire, "Are you trying to rebel? Just talk. Why are you moving your feet?" Wang Ba, Huang Xiong, and other people in the room were not to be trifled with. Normally, Bao Inquire would have jumped down obediently after hearing this. However, today was different. Not only did he not move, he seemed to be even more agitated. His face and neck were red. "Big news, big news. I just came back from the military instructor's place. Big news, there's no news more important than this." People passing by the other rooms gathered around. It was rare to see Bao Inquire rambling like this. "It must be big news." Someone asked, "What's the matter? Is Military Governor Xiao getting married?" This was just a casual question because there were 10 impossibilities in the Liangzhou guards. For example, Shenhan couldn't be soft-hearted, Liang Ping couldn't not scold people, Ma Damei couldn't not gamble. The biggest impossibility, which was also the one that everyone thought was unshakable, was that Xiao Ju couldn't get married. If this impossibility was broken, then it would be considered big news. However, it should be impossible. As they were thinking this, Bao Inquire nodded. Yes, that's right. Military Governor Xiao is getting married." Everyone didn't react at first. When they realized what was going on, they immediately became excited. They surrounded the table and asked Bao Inquire, Who is Military Governor Xiao marrying? Are you sure it's Military Governor Xiao who's getting married and not someone else? Bao Inquire, is your information accurate or not? Why do I feel like it's not reliable? Does Military Governor Xiao look like someone who would get married? I think it's fake. Let's disperse. Don't fall for it. Bao Inquire was furious when he heard this. The veins on his neck bulged. He clenched his fists and stomped his feet. Why would I lie? I heard everything clearly. The military instructors were all scared. His Majesty personally bestowed the marriage. When the words "bestowed the marriage" came out, half of the people inside and outside the room believed it. Military Governor Xiao couldn't possibly take the initiative to get married. However, bestowing the marriage was something that His Majesty had given. How could he go against His Majesty's orders? Now that he said it, it wasn't impossible. Xiao Mai asked, "Is it really a bestowed marriage?" Then His Majesty bestowed the marriage to Military Governor Xiao. Which family's young miss is it? A person outside was leaning against the window and listening. When he heard this, he answered without thinking. Of course it's young Miss Shen from Censor Shun's residence. Shen Wuxia had stayed in the Liang province guards for so long, and helped many wounded soldiers. This young miss didn't despise them, and even gave them medicine. The soldiers all liked her very much and spoke up for her. Yes, young Miss Shen and the commander-in-chief are a match made in heaven. They're a golden couple. A talented man and a beautiful woman. They should be the most compatible couple in Dawei. Bao Inquire's answer disappointed them. No, it's not Dr. Shen. Everyone looked at each other. It's actually not Shen Wuxia. Young Miss Shen was such a kind-hearted deity. Even she couldn't become Xiao Ju's wife. Which family's young miss was bestowed the marriage by His Majesty? If it's not Dr. Shen, then who is it? Bao Inquire. It's He Yan. When the two words He Yan came out, the inside and outside of the room quieted down a bit. Wang Ba, who had been lazily dozing off, sat up. Jiang Jiao had just entered the room and heard this sentence. He thought there was something wrong with his ears. Which He Yan? Sure too was the most composed and asked. It's He Yan from our Liang province guards. Someone laughed. Bao inquired, are you drunk? You're faking His Majesty's edict. If you're not careful, you'll be sued. He Yan is a man. How could His Majesty bestow a marriage to two men? Are you crazy? Or is this He Yan with the same name? At this time, Bao inquired wasn't in a rush. He knew that his words would explode among the recruits of the Liang province guards, no, even among the soldiers of the southern prefecture. Who told him to have good ears and be the first to hear such big news? Who says His Majesty can't bestow a marriage to two men? His gaze swept over everyone in the room. Only when he took in everyone's expressions did he say unhurriedly, besides, He Yan is a woman. Of course she can be Military Governor Zhao's wife. Guangdang, Liang Ping's foot slipped and he fell flat on his face. However, he wasn't in a hurry to grimace in pain. Instead, he looked toward Shen Han, his gaze filled with doubt. What did you say? He Yan is a woman, Shen Han said with a cold expression. Don't be fooled by how calm he looked right now. Heaven knew how much disbelief he had felt when Tian Lang, the vice soldier of the southern prefecture guards, came to tell him this news. He Yan was a woman? How was this possible? How could there be a woman in this world who could eat more than a man, fight more than a man, and adapt to the harsh climate and training of the Liang province guards better than a man? When the instructors heard this news, they all collectively sank into a silence filled with doubt. No matter what, they couldn't imagine that the person who was sweating like rain on the martial arts field, yet was so carefree and cheerful, personally taking the heads of two of Rida and Muzi's personal guards was a woman. This was clearly a youth with exceptional talent, so how could he be a woman? A woman could reach this level, yet they were easily defeated by He Yan. There wasn't a single person in the Liang province guards who could compare to He Yan. Didn't this mean that all of them, as grown men, couldn't compare to a 16 or 17-year-old little girl? If it was said that He Yan was a woman, they were only shocked and shocked. Then the fact that His Majesty bestowed a marriage between Xiao Ju and He Yan made these instructors tremble with fear. Before Tian Lang left, he kindly and subtly reminded Shen Han. The military governor values Miss He greatly. What a joke! How could he just value her? This iron tree that hadn't bloomed in 10,000 years was blooming for the first time in front of the civil and military officials of the imperial court, in front of the emperor and the empress. As soon as the celebratory banquet ended, rumors spread everywhere about how the military governor of the Right Army treated his sweetheart gently. Then here came the question. If military governor Xiao was so considerate to his sweetheart, then how much was military governor Zhao's dissatisfaction with these devilish instructors who tortured and trained his sweetheart, often making the little girl run with weights, and standing in the sun for several hours? It was hard to say. Ma Damiai's face was pale. Previously, during the winter in Liang province, I soaked in the hot spring with Miss He. Everyone's faces were ashen, especially the instructor who had been the happiest at that time. He was about to cry. They now understood why He Yan refused to go into the hot spring in every possible way, and even said that he had a hidden illness. It turned out that he was actually a girl. Fortunately, Xiao Ju didn't appear at that time. Otherwise, if things continued to develop, perhaps all the instructors in the room would have hidden illnesses. Then what should we do now? Someone asked in a trembling voice. What do you mean, what should we do? Shen Han said. Just do your own thing. It has nothing to do with you. Although now it seemed that it was stupid of him to believe that He Yan and Xiao Ju had broken up, Shen Han felt that he was quite far-sighted. At least he could see the unusual atmosphere between the two at a glance, right? Shen Han didn't stray from the path of standing between these two people. Now he just changed from a man to a woman. What was wrong with that? Anyway, he had always stood firmly on the side of Xiao Ju and He Yan. He Yan was a person with a temperament. He probably wouldn't bite the hand that fed him, right? Chu Linfeng's residence was also very happy today. Shi Jinbo was said to be an official in the Shuo capital, but these years, he was no longer as glorious as before. Chu Linfeng had 3 legitimate sons. Other than the eldest son who got a small official position in the Shuo capital, which was bought by Madame Chu with money, the other 2 legitimate sons didn't get to be officials. On the contrary, the illegitimate son who was brought back from outside became the most promising one. Not only was he the current prime minister's favorite student, but he was also the prime minister's son-in-law. With this relationship, the Chu family would definitely prosper in the future. Thinking of this, Chu Linfeng was very proud. When the celebration ended and he returned to his residence, he immediately sent people to spread the news and buy things. He also said that he wanted to renovate Chu Zhao's courtyard, so that Su Pingting wouldn't think their courtyard was shabby after she married into the Chu family. Madame Chu coldly looked at Chu Linfeng's undisguised joy and didn't say anything. Her 3 sons, however, were a little angry. After Chu Linfeng left, they complained to Madame Chu. Father is too biased. He's just the son of a brothel girl, and he's already like this. When we 3 brothers got married, Father wasn't as happy as he is today. These words were true. Although Chu Linfeng didn't treat his 3 sons badly, he still disliked them for being too mediocre. In comparison, he preferred Chu Zhao, who could make him proud in front of his colleagues. When Chu Zhao first came to the Chu family, the 3 brothers bullied him a lot. Madame Chu also wanted to get rid of Chu Zhao when he grew up, just like those concubines. The worst part was that the boy had somehow learned to be so cunning. He had made Chu Linfeng so happy that he took him everywhere. Madame Chu couldn't find a chance to make a move on him. Later on, he even had a relationship with Prime Minister Su. Madame Chu didn't dare to make a move on Prime Minister Su's people. His mother relied on her face to make a living. She gave birth to a son like that. 3rd young Master Chu's words were especially harsh. 4th young Master Chu is better than his mother. At least he sold his body to the capital's Su family for a good price. Madame Chu frowned. Although she didn't like Chu Zhao and wanted Chu Zhao to die in the suburbs tomorrow, she didn't want her sons to become as mean as a woman because of this. Sometimes, when she thought about it, it was no wonder that Chu Linfeng doted on Chu Zhao. These 3 sons of his were probably spoiled since they were young. Compared to Chu Zhao, they were indeed much worse. Are we just going to let that kid have a meteoric rise? Eldest young Master Chu said unwillingly. If that happens, we won't have a say in the Chu family in the future. Don't worry. Madame Chu laughed and said in a gloomy tone. Do you really think that it's so easy to marry the Prime Minister's daughter? Don't forget that Chu Xilan has a femme fatale in Xiang. Chapter 204. The news that He Yan was a woman, and that she was betrothed to Xiao Ju by His Majesty didn't stop there. The Shen family in the capital was dead silent today. Shen Wuxia knelt on the ground and lowered his head without saying a word. Eldest young Master Shen and Madame Shen stood aside. Madame Shen looked worried and wanted to say something. After a while, eldest young Master Shen opened his mouth and looked at Censor Shen, who was standing in the hall with his hands behind his back and a cold face. He softly comforted him. My sister was confused for a moment. Father, don't blame her too much. Confused for a moment? Censor Shen turned around and his gaze fell on Shen Wuxia. It was unclear whether he was distressed or angry. He said, My Shen family is proud and loyal. I didn't expect to raise a daughter. I don't know when she learned those dirty tricks. She was confused for a moment. If she is not careful, she will harm others' lives. Censor Shen was very thin and handsome. Although he was old now, one could still see some of his charm when he was young. The arrogance and coldness in his eyes were the same as Shen Wuxia's. He was usually strict with his son, but was especially tolerant with his daughter. This was the first time he was angry with Shen Wuxia. Even when Shen Wuxia insisted on going to the border with Xiao Ju, Censor Shen was not as angry as he was today. You can't say that. Madame Shen felt sorry for her daughter. Yan is a woman. Wuxia was just telling the truth. If she didn't deceive His Majesty first, how could her identity be exposed by others? She should be punished for her mistakes. You keep saying that Wuxia is wrong, but Wuxia is really thinking for His Majesty. You can't let a woman use a man's identity to deceive others, right? As soon as she spoke, Censor Shen looked at her coldly. Madame Shen did not dare to speak. Censor Shen said, Ridiculous. You only saw her disguise as a man to join the army and deceive the world. Why didn't you see her lead the army to fight against the Yudo? Jiang water battle, run to city defense. Do you think it is easy to earn merits? If she didn't have the merit of saving lives, how could His Majesty promote her to Marquis Wen so easily? Moreover, he stared at his daughter. I heard that when we were in Liangzhou, there was a spy who infiltrated the city guard institution. You didn't know the details, And He Yan sent you away. No matter what the result was, she was always helping you. I've taught you since you were young that you should repay the kindness of a drop of water with a gushing spring. If you owe someone a favor, even if they don't take it to heart, you should remember it in your heart. I didn't expect you to remember it like this. Shin Wuxia hung his head in silence. I also didn't expect. Censor Shin seemed to want to finish his sentence in one breath. Not only did you want to be the villain who exposed her identity, but you also didn't dare to stand out openly, and wanted to hide behind Wang Rong. Did you know that by doing this, you would also harm Wang Rong? Shin Wuxia trembled slightly. At the palace banquet, the stranger who revealed He Yan's identity was called Wang Rong. She was also her Qing Mei childhood sweetheart. The two of them had known each other for a long time. Wang Rong's father and Censor Shin were good friends. Shin Wuxia knew that Wang Rong liked him, but her heart was completely focused on Xiaoju. It wasn't that she didn't think of personally exposing her, but in the end, she couldn't bear to do it. She was afraid that He Yan would lose his life because of this. She didn't want to take He Yan's life. She only hoped that He Yan would stay away from Xiaoju. She was even more afraid of Xiaoju's disappointed and cold gaze. When Wang Rong came to the Shin residence, she saw Shin Wuxia's worries and asked. Shin Wuxia couldn't help but reveal his confusion and worries. After listening, Wang Rong didn't say a word. She turned and left saying, "Wait." "Wait for what?" He didn't say. "I didn't expect him to do this." Shin Wuxia weakly explained. Her father, Censor Shin, stared at her with a sharp gaze. His voice was like a knife that could cut her open. "You really didn't expect it?" Shin Wuxia was speechless. She really didn't expect it? Wang Rong liked her for many years. For her, she was willing to do anything. She was impulsive and didn't care about the consequences. When she told Wang Rong about this, didn't she expect Wang Rong's reaction? She just didn't want to admit that she was such a despicable person. Seeing Shin Wuxia trembling, eldest young master Shun's heart softened. He said, "Even so, sister already knows her mistake. Father, you also know that sister has been in love with Xiao Huijin for many years. How can sister feel good when another woman suddenly appeared? Sister has never liked to tell others about her grievances. It's my fault as her brother that I didn't think it through. That's why I didn't realize it until now. Father, if you want to punish, then punish me as well. It has nothing to do with elder brother. I made a mistake. I'll take responsibility for my own actions." Shin Wuxia knelt straight. "You liked Xiao Huijin for so many years. Did he respond to you at all?" Censor Shin suddenly said. Shin Wuxia looked at him. "Love never changes from being moved." Censor Shin said faintly. "You wanted to go outside and leave Shuajing to be by his side. Although I didn't support it, I didn't oppose it either. I knew that Xiao Huijin wouldn't fall in love with you, but I always thought that as long as you left the residence, walked a wider road, and met more people, your heart would naturally be broader. Gradually you would let go of him. I didn't expect," he sighed, "that it would push you deeper and deeper." Shin Wuxia pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Even her father could tell that Xiaoju wouldn't fall in love with her. She had never felt that she was such a failure. These words were too harsh. Madame Shin couldn't help but say angrily, "How can there be a father like you in this world? That Xiao Huijin didn't like Mu Shui, it's his own fault. I don't like him. A woman entering the military camp for no reason. I don't know what saving the common people is. I only know that all the rules are messed up. Xiao Huijin would rather marry such a woman than be afraid of being laughed at by the world." Eldest young master Shin wanted to say something but stopped. This time, Censor Shin didn't pay attention to his wife's rebuttal. He only looked at Shin Wuxia and said, "The places you've traveled are no less than He Yan. The people you've met may not be less than He Yan, but your outlook and ideals are much worse than hers. It's not that I don't believe you, but after tonight, the difference between the two of you will be obvious. You're not as good as her." Shin Wuxia's eyes suddenly welled up with tears. She had been strong all her life and didn't want to cry in front of others. However, at this moment, she couldn't hold back her grievances and shame. Censor Shin didn't look at her anymore. He said calmly, "From today onwards, you are not allowed to go anywhere. Our Shin family doesn't use force. If you make a mistake, you will be grounded at home for a year. Master. Censor Shin didn't pay attention to his wife's pleas. He flicked his sleeves and left the hall. The night wind outside the courtyard was extremely cold. When it blew on one's face, it was as painful as a knife. Eldest young Master Shin caught up and walked to Censor Shin's side. Father, isn't a year too long? Censor Shin looked at the bricks on the ground and smiled bitterly. Xiao Huijin is a protective person. Do you think that he won't be able to find out that it was Mu Shui? But, because of his father, he won't do anything to Mu Shui. However, in these years, the relationship between our family and Xiao family ends here. Of course, these people weren't the only ones who were shocked by this. In the Chung family, the relatives who heard about Xiao Ju's marriage were all shocked and suspicious. Everything was going well, but His Majesty suddenly bestowed a marriage. They were busy being surprised by the marriage and didn't pay much attention to He Yin. They only knew that his family didn't have any official position, and his status wasn't comparable to Bai Rongwei's. As for Chung Lisu, compared to Xiao Ju's marriage, he was more surprised that He Yin was a woman. My eldest brother. How could he be a woman? The young boy paced back and forth in the room, unconsciously tugging at the corner of his clothes. How could this be? When he first returned to the capital, he was caught by the Chung family and thrown into school to study. He was only allowed to go home once a month. On the day he went home, he was locked in the house to practice calligraphy and couldn't go anywhere. Therefore, when Xiao Ju and the others returned to the capital, Chung Lisu didn't even have the chance to visit the Xiao family. When he finally returned home this month, not only did he hear that Xiao Ju and He Yin were back, he also received good news that His Majesty had bestowed a marriage upon the two of them. My eldest brother. He grabbed a servant and said, can kill a tiger with one punch. How could he be a woman? Heavens, was he crazy, or was it the world that was crazy? No, I have to go find uncle. He opened the door and walked out. He wanted to find Xiao Ju and ask him about it. No, young master. Master and madam said that you can't leave the manor. Someone, the young master, wants to go out. The servant behind him hurriedly followed. Woo, you're all liars. In the Song family, Song Taotao was crying. How could my brother he be a woman? You must be lying. The little girl's eyes were swollen from crying. Madam Song and Master Song stood outside the door and looked at each other helplessly. Ever since Song Taotao returned from the capital, she had become much more obedient. Every day, she would practice the 4 arts at home. Madam Song suspected that she had someone she liked. If she really did have someone she liked, what would happen to her marriage with the Chung family? They knew Song Taotao's temperament very well. In the past, she didn't know what it felt like to like someone. Chung Lisu was also a lively young man. The two of them thought that after spending time together, their feelings would naturally develop. However, if she had someone else in her heart, they were afraid that the marriage would become an enemy. It wasn't that Madam Song didn't ask Song Taotao who the person in her heart was. Every time, Song Taotao would fool her. The little girl was very smart. She knew that He Yan's status wasn't high. Even if she told her parents, they wouldn't agree. It was better to wait a little longer. With that young man's ability, it was only a matter of time before he became a high-ranking official. Before that, she didn't need to tell anyone. She just needed to catch him. It wasn't until tonight that the news of Xiao Ju's betrothal came. Song Taotao went on a hunger strike at home, crying and throwing a tantrum. She was so upset that she wanted to hang herself. It was only then that Madam Song and Old Master Song found out that their daughter's sweetheart was Xiao Ju's fiancé. The couple didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Taotao, don't cry. You're a girl. Crying is useless. Quickly wipe your tears. Your eyes are swollen like walnuts. That's right. Anyway, young Master Cheng's uncle is Military Governor Xiao. If you like Miss He, when you marry young Master Cheng in the future, you can often visit Xiao family. Won't you be able to see Miss He often? It would have been better if she didn't hear it. Once she heard it, Song Taotao became even more sad. Who wants to visit Xiao family? She cheated my feelings. I don't want to see her anymore. Woo. This side was in turmoil and chaos. On the other side, people didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There were also people who were like stray dogs. They were anxious and uneasy. When they returned to the residence, they saw that everyone was traumatized. Su Jiheng couldn't fall asleep. When he returned to the residence, he told He Xining that he had a lot of official documents to deal with today. He told He Xining to sleep early. Then he locked himself in the study. He Xining got up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet. When she thought of Su Jiheng, she found a thick mattress from the cabinet. The weather was getting colder. Su Jiheng slept in the study. It was warmer than sleeping in the bedroom. If he caught a cold, it would be troublesome. She carried the mattress to the study. However, she found that the lights were on and there was no one in the study. He Xining sat on a chair in the study for a while. She thought that perhaps Su Jiheng would come back in a while. She didn't expect that after 15 minutes, there was still no movement. She was stunned. She was worried and suspicious. Even if he went to the toilet, it was still too long. Could something have happened to him? Last year, there was a family in the capital who got up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet. The floor was covered in frost. It was dark and they couldn't see clearly. When they stepped on the frost, they slipped. When the servants found them the next day, they were already gone. She was worried that Su Jiheng had fallen somewhere. She didn't dare to disturb others. She left the mattress in the study and went around looking for him with a lantern. She didn't find her parents-in-law's courtyard. She only walked around her own courtyard. She didn't find Su Jiheng's figure. It was so late. Could it be that he went out of the residence? He Xining thought for a while. She didn't know why, but for some strange reason, she turned her gaze to the courtyard next to hers. He Yan's courtyard. This courtyard was where her elder sister, the short-lived eldest Madame Su, used to live. After He Yan's death, this courtyard was sealed and all the servants in the courtyard were dismissed. However, He Xining once heard a rumor that there weren't many servants serving He Yan. Sometimes, those servants were assigned to serve another concubine of the Su family. He Xining was skeptical about this rumor. In any case, she was still a daughter of the He family. No matter how bold the Su family was, they wouldn't dare to neglect her. Moreover, He Xining didn't see that concubine after entering the residence. When he asked, she only said that she made a mistake and was kicked out. He Xining was well aware that the Su family might have done this because they were afraid that she, as the new bride, would feel uncomfortable. However, since they valued her so much, they wouldn't treat He Yan badly. After a long time, He Xining forgot about this matter and thought it was just a rumor that couldn't be taken seriously. However, there were some strange things about He Yan. For example, this courtyard. The Su family said that Su Jiheng missed his wife, so he left this courtyard empty and didn't let anyone else live in it. However, He Xining had never seen Su Jiheng go to this courtyard. Wouldn't someone who missed his wife often go to places where she used to live and pick up old things to reminisce? However, perhaps Su Jiheng was afraid that he would think of her when he saw the things, so he deliberately didn't go. He Xining found an excuse for Su Jiheng. She was originally a bit jealous of He Yan, but now, she didn't feel any jealousy at all. There was no meaning in fighting with a dead person, especially when He Xining didn't feel that He Yan was a threat to her. In other words, she didn't feel Su Jiheng's unforgettable love for He Yan. The lantern gave off a faint light, and the wind outside blew, blowing away all of her sleepiness. She looked at the dark and empty courtyard and thought for a while. She couldn't help but move her feet, heading towards that place. She had only been to this courtyard once, not long after she married into the Su family. However, she only went as far as the courtyard. When He Xining wanted to enter the room, a servant girl came out and quietly said, "Young mistress, the young master doesn't allow others to enter this courtyard." He Xining was a new bride at that time and didn't want to quarrel with Su Jiheng over this matter, so she left. After a long time, she didn't want to go back. Tonight, she didn't know why, but she inexplicably wanted to go and take a look. He Yan was previously recuperating in the farmstead, and after returning to the He family, she quickly got married. Speaking of which, she didn't spend much time with this older sister of hers. So much so that she almost couldn't remember what He Yan looked like. But perhaps, she could still see the place He Yan lived, and catch a glimpse of the traces of blood relatives who once lived there. Unknowingly, she had already walked to the courtyard. The courtyard was as cold as always. Whether it was summer or autumn, it was always as cold as winter. The servant girls cleaned the ground, but they couldn't get rid of the old and decadent air. He Xining slowly walked to the door, and was about to push it open when suddenly she paused. There was a sound in the room. She was nervous at first, afraid that there was a thief in the courtyard, but after hearing the sound, she felt that the thief wouldn't be so daring. So she carried the lantern and secretly walked to the bedside, peeking through the gap in the paper window. The oil lamp in the room was lit, and she saw Su Zhiheng. A Su Zhiheng who was completely different from his usual self. Su Zhiheng was still wearing the clothes he wore when he entered the palace today. He was an extremely particular person. Normally, after returning to the residence, he would take a bath and change his clothes, but he didn't today. He sat in front of the large table in the room, frantically opening the wooden drawer over and over again, rummaging through it. His movements were very rough, no longer as gentle and refined as before. From the angle of the window, he looked like a complete madman. He Xining's heart skipped a beat, and a chill ran down her spine from head to toe. Looking at her strange husband, she actually felt a sense of fear in her heart. In her panic, she accidentally stepped on the shirtu. Bang! The shirtu slipped and fell down the steps in the courtyard, making a loud noise. Who is it? At the same time, Su Zhiheng raised his head from inside the room. He pulled open the door with a whoosh and rushed out shouting, "Who's there?" He Xining was scared out of her wits. For a moment, she suddenly wanted to run away. She felt that Su Zhiheng would turn into an evil spirit in the next moment, and pounce on her to take her life. She forced a smile, stood up and said, "It's me." Su Zhiheng narrowed his eyes and looked at the person in front of him. After a while, the viciousness and nervousness in his eyes gradually faded away, and was replaced by a smile. However, this smile was stiff and perfunctory no matter how one looked at it. His tone was also a little anxious. "Xining, why are you here?" "I was afraid that husband would be cold at night, so I took the mattress and went to the study to look for you, but I couldn't find you. I was worried that husband would fall in the dark at night, so I took the lantern and went around looking for you." She saw that Su Zhiheng's expression was somewhat nervous, and her heart was moved. She smiled and said, "I only came to try my luck. I didn't think that husband would really be here. Husband must have missed big sister." Su Zhiheng stared blankly for a moment, then agreed. "Yes." He Xining sighed and said sadly, "It's a good thing that husband is in love, but sometimes you have to think about your own body." Su Zhiheng closed the door and covered He Xining's eyes. He pulled He Xining's hand and walked out. "Forget it, it's cold outside. Don't catch a cold with me. Let's go back." His hand was so cold that it seemed as if there wasn't a trace of life in it. He Xining obediently replied, "Husband, didn't I tell you before that I wanted to take advantage of mid-autumn to go up the mountain to pray to the Bodhisattva? My mother is finally free these few days. I want to go up the mountain the day after tomorrow and pray for big sister in heaven. Is that okay?" Su Zhiheng's expression stiffened for a moment. "Okay." "Husband, do you want to go together?" He Xining asked. "I won't be going," Su Zhiheng replied. "I'm very busy these few days, so I might not be able to accompany you up the mountain." When He Xining heard this, she didn't get angry. She just smiled and said, "It's okay, then I'll count your share and pray to the Bodhisattva. Husband is busy with important matters of the country, so the Bodhisattva won't blame you." She was very obedient and considerate. She was also very good at saying things that flattered people. She was a smart woman, but also very stupid. This was what Su Zhiheng liked about her. Compared to He Yan, it was much easier to put on an act in front of He Xining. His heart gradually relaxed. The fear he felt when he heard that familiar name at tonight's celebration banquet was also washed away by the two of them. He Yan was already dead. The dead wouldn't come back. Then the living person was just pretending to be a ghost. Together with He Rufei, he would thoroughly investigate the background of the person who was pretending to be a ghost. The lantern emitted a dim light in the night. He didn't see the dark and gloomy expression of the woman beside him hidden in her obedient voice. He Xining felt that she had never really known this husband of hers. The Su Zhiheng she saw through the crack in the window just now was crazy, paranoid, anxious and ruthless. It made her vaguely feel that the Su Zhiheng at that time was the real Su Zhiheng. She couldn't help but have doubts. Then, Was this refined, considerate, and seemingly flawless man the real Su Zhiheng? Had her sister, Hiyan, ever seen this side of Su Zhiheng? Hiyan was so weak, and her body had always been weak. If Su Zhiheng accidentally revealed this side of him in front of Hiyan, would her sister be scared out of her wits? But Hiyan was already dead. She couldn't ask a dead person. Xining suddenly felt that this seemingly gentle and beautiful Su family seemed to have many secrets that she didn't know. A terrifying thought surfaced in her mind. Did Hiyan really accidentally drown to death?